Hello, everyone, and welcome to all of you who are tuning in to our inaugural Index Gaming Summit. I'm Sophia, partner at Index, working closely with our gaming portfolio.
And hello, everyone. I'm Demir, also a partner at Index focused on gaming. At Index, we have a long history of investing in gaming companies across the US and Europe. We're on the ground in both geographies and take a true team-based approach to finding companies to work with. We back gaming companies across various stages, from the idea stage out of our seed fund, to the early usage stage out of our venture fund, to the scale-up stage out of our growth fund. Today, as Sophia mentioned, we're excited to host our inaugural gaming summit, featuring fireside chats with many founders and operators in our portfolio. These include the likes of Discord, Dream Games, Roblox, Rec Room, Supercell, and King, just to name a few. We're also fortunate to have with us a few friends of Index, from the likes of Axie Infinity, Polygon Studios, and others. We'll discuss some emerging areas in gaming that we're researching.
At Index, gaming has been and continues to be a core investment theme. Games have entertained people of all ages and genders and geographies for millennia. From chess and other popular board games to early video games to today's mobile hits, games are daily rituals, and they've come to occupy a defining role in cultures around the world. In fact, today, the video games market is larger than $150 billion. And this is greater than music, box office, and video streaming combined. At Index, we continue to see enormous potential for this growing consumer category across genres and platforms, and we're excited to back the next generation of gaming founders across core areas like casual and sandbox, but also across games that are built to be cross-platform, AAA games that are built for mobile, and also emerging areas like VR and blockchain gaming.
Throughout this summit, we'll be covering topics that are tied to the idea of building an enduring gaming company. We'll start off by diving into the ingredients and process involved with creating hit IP. We'll follow that up with discussions on Roblox's role in the ever-expanding metaverse and how games are becoming the new hub for social interaction. And we'll also discuss, as Sophia mentioned, some emerging areas like cloud and blockchain gaming and how that might transform gameplay overall. Lastly, we'll cap it off with a fireside chat with Ilka, the co-founder of Supercell, and Sebastian, the co-founder of King, two founders that we've been very fortunate to work with at Index, who will discuss their experience building leading global gaming studios.
We hope you'll enjoy this event, and thank you all for joining us. Welcome everyone to today's session discussing the secrets behind building iconic IP in gaming. And today I'm really fortunate to have both Soner and Genova with us here today. So Soner, CEO and co-founder of Dream Games, the studio behind the casual puzzle hit title Royal Match, which within the first year of launch has reached the top 3 position on the US iOS App Store. Prior to Dream Games, Soner was involved with product at Peak Games. With us today, we also have Genova, CEO and creative director at That Game Company, the successful studio behind a number of titles across platforms, the likes of Cloud, Flow, Flower, Journey, and most recently Sky. Soner and Genova, really happy to have you both with us here today. Soner, maybe to kick us off with just a little bit of history. So you've seen firsthand through your experience at Peak Games that the casual puzzle genre can be competitive. Why did you decide to return to casual puzzle, and what motivated you to start building Royal Match at Dream Games?
Thank you very much, Sophia. So we created 2 successful casual puzzle titles at Peak. So with these titles, we realized that reaching the mass market audience globally is extremely difficult. However, when you achieve it, it's a great feeling to feel that millions of players all around the world play your game every day. So just because of that, we want to keep our focus on casual puzzle to reach global mass market. We know it's still one of the biggest genres. Casual puzzle is highly competitive, but if you create a high quality puzzle game in this genre, millions of players will appreciate it.
And what is it about puzzle, just to double click on that, that gives it such great staying power among players when you manage to reach such critical mass?
In puzzle games, we are combining both skill and luck in the gameplay. So it makes it more fun, and it makes it possible to play in a longer term. Without having a being bored from the game. So it's a great genre for mass market audience because of its nature. It's not entirely skill based like a strategy game, or it's not entirely luck based like a social casino game. So there is a great balance in puzzle games. So I think it's make it powerful in the long term.
Well, we'll come back to touch a bit more on how to strike the balance of level design and so forth. But just before we get there, Genova, want to talk a little bit about what motivated you as well. You've previously mentioned a great anecdote about how the experience that astronauts have in space was actually what inspired you to design Journey, with the goal of feeling a sense of vulnerability, which in some ways goes against some of the common emotional pulls that we see with other popular games or genres like shooters and adventure games. Can you talk a little bit about this motivation, and how have you thought about game design?
Yeah, so when we approach games at That Game Company, we really like to push the boundary of what games could possibly be to bring an emotional experience to the audience. And to be honest, that game has been a long time being just limited in console, and majority of the players are men. And men and women have different emotional needs, and young men and older men also have very different emotional desire. For young male, which was the console target, power fantasy is really the emotion that drives what they want to experience. However, when we make our online games, we want to build emotional connections. We want people to connect with each other and have compassion and affections with each other instead of competitions. And so we start to realize that there are certain emotions that would pro-social connections, and other emotions that's actually against. And so it took us quite a while to find out that, the emotion of feeling vulnerable and feeling small and have a sense of awe is actually what connected human beings together, when we were much weaker against nature, right? But when we actually feel very powerful, you know, everybody's a Superman or Batman, we tend to feel like wanting to conquer and compete. And this is also why in most of the online competitive game today, it's super toxic. It's because the very nature of the emotion of the activity. So in the process of trying to build an experience that unites people and connects people, we, you know, really kind of aim for creating this environment that allow people to be vulnerable with each other.
I mean, very interesting. And you touch on this element of emotion. And perhaps this is a question for both of you. And when thinking about game design, there's so many different elements that go into the making of a successful IP, everything from emotion, story, the art design, the graphics, IP, character IP. You talked a bit about bringing people together, Genova, and Sonar, you touched on the right balance. When thinking about all these different elements that in their own right need to work well, but then they also need to work well together, how do you think about placing the relative importance of these different elements when building, and what do you anchor it on?
Maybe I can start. So for us, like having a strong character is really important in a game, to have an emotional attachment to an IP. Otherwise, it's hard to have an emotional attachment to an entertainment IP. So these areas that you mentioned, all of them are critical for a great IP, but having a strong character is one of the most important part. So it's because I believe the first thing that you recognize from a human or a creature or animal is the eyes of a character. So I think the connection is become from the eyes of the character. So for it can be like Mario or a Pokemon, or even like Mike Wazowski from Monster Inc. That it should have at least one eye. So you should feel the emotions from the eye to have that sense of connection, the emotional connection. But at the end of the day, what we are doing is a game. So if you ask me, the most critical part of a successful game is, I believe, is gameplay mechanics and gameplay experience is the most important part. So we are putting the gameplay experience in the core, and we are supporting other things, supporting with other things to the gameplay experience.
Genova, what do you think?
Yeah, that's very interesting. So our game Sky and Journey, our characters, while having a face, it does not actually have a proper like a human eye with like eye white and pupils and everything. Our eye is pretty much that it's more like a dot.
Yeah.
So it's funny because we're working on online games, so we expect the player to use our character as their avatar, right? This is not their idol, this is their avatar. So as an avatar, if there is a soul in the eye, it's the player actually feel distant because it's like, that's not particularly me. So when it's in a multiplayer game, we actually want the face and the eye to be more neutral, so that the player can project themselves onto these characters. But that's for multiplayer games. And I very much agree with what you're saying about gameplay is the king. Because after all, video games is a much larger set of a collection of different medium coming together to play. I always say like game is more advanced than film, right, and theater, because it simply has more capable medium available as a tool for the director. And to me, the two major new tools that the game industry has brought in that cinema doesn't have. The first one is input-output, right, which is game mechanics. If you press a button, what happens? And that's a whole, a field of science. Of many people study psychology and everything. But the second element to me is more subtle, and that is the social dynamics between the players. If you're making a stage play, if you're making a film, you don't need to worry about what happens between audience. But for games, it does. And the social dynamics between people is quite important, and you can actually use that as a way to be an instrument in the orchestra. And so for me, certainly games are totally possible to just be cinema. If you look at a lot of movie companies these days are using like Unreal and other real-time tools to make films. But what really differentiates game as a medium, we gotta have to push the interactivity and the social dynamics as the leading role, which will really be where innovation and kind of groundbreaking thing would happen in the field of interactive entertainment.
I mean, you know what? Very interesting. And if I'm not mistaken, in Sky, so your most recent title, there's been a lot of gifting between players, precisely to your point around the importance of player interactions. To what do you ascribe this, that there has been such gifting and there's a bunch of sales, merchandise flowing between players?
Yeah, so when we were working on console games are sold like movie tickets, right? $60, you buy a console game, and that's the end of it. So in order to make a purchase, we spent the past 40 years for game industry to build trust between the developers and the players, right? They would look at a title and look at a trailer and spend $60. That's the trust we've built. But when we move gaming beyond the consoles and PCs, that's roughly about 200 to 300 million people to today 3 billion people. Lots of people have no trust in what game is, right? So a lot of us are shifting from the premium price to a free to try model, right? Free to play. But at some point, people needs to pay. And I have been, this has been a difficult transition for us, because before we were like, we're so proud of our craft. Hey, if you don't want to play us, don't pay for it, right? But on the mobile phone, every game is free. So what we realized is we have to change the way our game monetize compared to how we used to treat things. And to me, there's an emotion behind every interactive design, right? Do you pay for something because of, your friend has something better, of a jealousy, right? Or do you pay for something for revenge? Do you pay for something because of a huge discount, a sense of saving or fear of missing out? Like if you don't buy this discount right now, it's gone, right? So each of these monetization model has been, kind of trialed and tested in different fields before they were put into games. For example, with the airline credit cards, right? Like you build your credits by keep using this airline, right? So these are all mechanics that exist in the real world. But if you really think about how you feel about them when you pay money, there are certain emotions that makes you feel kind of guilty to tell people that you spend money in that. And there are certain emotions that makes you feel proud that you spend money in that. One case I run into is I have a friend who played a lot of Candy Crush. And she told me that she has to bribe her son to play Candy Crush because he's playing better than her, right? So she can stay ahead of her friends, or the, kind of middle-aged woman group. And she would never tell them like how much money she would pay in the game to stay ahead, because it's kind of cheating, right? If you pay, you're cheating in a competition. But at the same time, I've seen, some of my coworkers take their family to Disneyland, right? And then they say, hey, I took my whole family to Disneyland this weekend. I was like, well, you guys stayed there? That's going to be very expensive, right? But they are very proud, like I spend money for the people I love, right? So for me, emotion is delicate And when we were thinking about, payment, we want to see these people who paid with a sense of pride. And that those are usually come from the altruistic spending, and so that's kind of like why we approach it, because we want to make a game that is family friendly. Like we want to see parents and children play the game together, and we want to make sure that if the parents did spend money, and they feel positive about their spending.
Soner, what do you think about some of these free-to-play monetization mechanics that Genova alluded to, and how have you thought about the business model for Royal Match?
Yeah. I love Genova's opinions on that. So because like we have many monetization mechanics, but from the beginning we have never focused on monetization. We just focus on the quality, and we strongly believe that if we have a high quality experience, people will pay money just because they are experiencing great fun and a great level design, great game design. So it should be from positive, not negative. So the money spent, and most of the times we are just focusing on quality, and when we see our monetization metrics, they are very strong. So we proved it several times, and we strongly believe that in the long term, quality wins. For business models, every time quality wins. So I love the idea of Genova's that like spending money for the friends and families is a great thing. We have never experienced it. We just implemented some kind of monetization mechanics to the game that we have some teams, the social layer in the game, and if you pay some money, you are gifting something to your friends as well. It's working, not like maybe Sky, but we are not focusing on the monetization. Actually, we are just focusing on the quality. For example, for other monetization mechanics like showing ads, we see that it's like contradictory of being quality and showing ads. So so some of our players demands to see some ads in the game to earn some rewards. They are suggesting to put some ads in the game. We are recently discussing it. Maybe in the future we can add some ads to the game, not interrupting the gameplay experience, to just give some rewards to the players, especially for non-payers maybe. But it's our main focus is on the long term and the quality still.
And Soner, to your point around quality and deliberate decision making around game design, there are several UX improvements that you've done with and that are notable in Royal Match versus some of the other Match 3 titles that are out there, such as sort of increased player agency in the game, board clarity, the fast animation speed. How have you thought about prioritizing these different improvements in order to build quality?
Yeah, like while we are approaching to game design, we have 3 rules actually. These 3 rules guide us every time. So one is, as I mentioned before, quality, high quality. Most of the times, like we are focusing on the tiny details, like thousands of details, and doing constant iterations to make it perfect. And the second one is being a long-term thinking, like having a long-term thinking, because most of the times you are implementing a new feature to the game. In the short term, it can be great for players and the business, but most of the times it can hurt the gameplay experience or player experience in the long term. So we are always be concerning about the long-term decisions. So like every decision that we are making should be long-term. And the other thing, the third rule is being user-centric, because like we are playing so many games to understand, like so many successful games and also unsuccessful games, or successful movies and unsuccessful movies, to understand what's the problem of unsuccessful games, for example. We are discussing a lot. So most of the times we are observing that these games are mainly business centric or or designer-centric, not instead of user-centric. So being user-centric is really helping us to understand the user instead of our needs or our like business needs. So all the time, if you are focusing on user needs, you are having a great experience. So with these 3 rules, it makes our lives easier to stay on a good track.
And perhaps a question for both of you, linked to what you were saying around how you're constantly making decisions. So coming down to the execution piece of game development, I mean, it seems that one common ingredient to a successful title is, on the one hand, deliberate product decision, a high quality product, but then there's also the other side of it, which is continued execution, whether that's regular content releases, robust tech in the back end, thoughtful distribution to the player base. How do you guys think about the trade-off between product and execution and blending it all together under one roof? Perhaps Genova, starting with you.
Yeah, so our latest game, Sky, is being around for 3 years, which our game usually lasts about 2 hours. And so when you have a product that is always live as a service, internally we don't like to call players as users because it sounded like it's just a software. We call it players as players. Sometimes I would describe them as guests, because we feel like we're really operating an online theme park, where it's a hospitality business, really. You want the player to have the best experience in the park, and so they will come back with friends. And so for us, it's really about, like how can we bring joy and how can we essentially create emotional memories for them so that they would keep coming back. Because in real life, I've been to Disneyland and had many wonderful experiences with friends, families, and if I have a cousin visiting me, I would take them to Disneyland, right? Because that's, like, to me, we focus on building, kind of long-lasting memories for the players and their friends.
Sonar, any thoughts?
Yeah, like execution, I think, is all about the team. So because like the all content development, like as everyone knows, is really important. But to keep the quality bar high and adding the new content to the game, it depends on how your team is and how you approach to the recruitment process. So we really care about our recruitment process to have a great team that can focus on the execution in the long term. And so we recently discussed, like last 2-3 years, we realized that the major, like there is a huge high quality content shortage in the gaming industry and also like entertainment industry in general. It's hard to find the high quality content in the market. So we believe that like the next couple of years, maybe this decade, actually, our main challenge will be adding, like, increasing our content development speed while we are keeping our quality bar high. So it will be really difficult and challenging part. So I think we will figure it out with a great team. Otherwise, it's impossible. We can discuss like quality, long-term, user-centric. These are words only. But at the end of the day, a great team can achieve those things.
And speaking of teams, and both of you have worked on numerous titles, how do you decide when to start developing a new IP versus allocating all internal resources towards one title that seems to be growing nicely? Perhaps, Genova, we'll start with you on this one.
To be honest, we are facing this dilemma every single day, and we're kind of just taking both. We put in a majority of the company to support, kind of a live game, which have millions of players every day. And it would be a disservice if we don't put that as a priority. But as a creative person and also knowing our players, they are always looking for the next excitement, right? So we are putting a small team that's working on this new title. And I think with IP, it has to be something really from inside out. It's like if you really have a strong desire to make something, right, and you have something to say, then it's more likely that voice is going to be common, and shared by many people. So to me, we're building a new game, and that's really based on some of the inspirations I had during the past decades while in Sky and developing Sky. Yeah, I honestly think it's really kind of inspiration, motivation driven. If sometimes people have writer's block, and if they don't have something, they probably shouldn't push that thing out as their next product. It needs to be something strong that you really want to play yourself, right? And you believe many other people, your family, your friends would want to play it too. And if you can see it, then it's more likely you can turn that into IP that other people would like.
Yeah, I totally agree. So like most of the times when we look at from business perspective, it's great to create a new IP. For example, even if you have a very outstanding long-term retention metrics for Royal Match, we are experiencing it, but still most of our players want a new game from us. So it seems great for sustainability of the business, but I think the company should feel it to start developing a new IP. Like when we start to feel it, we sit together, all the team members, we discuss day and night whether we are ready to create a new IP or not. So it should come from inside. Otherwise, you can start a new game, new IP, but most probably it will be not fun enough, because it starts from business, not from the creativity. So we experienced it before at Peak. So from after our first title from Toy Blast, then we decided to create another game just for increasing the revenues. So when we started the project, so like we worked day and night, and after a couple of months, we sit together and we said, okay, we don't want to do this, and we killed everything that we worked, and we started to watch Disney Pixar movies day and night to become more creative again, because business affected us really well and really too much. And then we said, okay, we need to be focused on the product and the entertainment again. Then we figured out how to create a new game after a couple of months. So recently, after Royal Match, it's a really successful game. Like around 2-3 months ago, we said, okay, it started to feel that like we need to create a new game. We want to create it. It's good for the company to be more creative. So we started, and we are asking ourselves every time, like at the end of every week, we are asking ourselves that, is it fun or not? So we feel fun, then it's going well.
Well, I look forward to playing both of your new titles when you feel like the time is right for you to launch them. Before we wrap up, just want to end on a bit of a prediction. As you think about the future of game design, both of you, and you've talked about the various inspirations that you've had and how you think about decision making, what are some of your predictions, or perhaps one prediction that you'd like to leave us with for where game design will take us in the future? Soner, let's.
Yeah, I think we will see, I think we will see more social design in games. So for example, we integrated a social layer to a casual puzzle game for the first time in 2017 with Toon Blast. People loved it, and right now you can see so many casual puzzle games in the market use the same social layer. So I believe we will figure out more deeper social elements and we will implement it to the gameplay. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with that prediction. What I see is, historically in the past 40 years, game when it's first existed in the arcades, it's appealing to both men and women. As emotion, it brings a sense of wonder because nobody have ever experienced that. But ever since we entered the home entertainment system, like Nintendo and PlayStation, it seems to kind of segregated the audience. The young boys tend to go to play in the 3D console games, where women tend to play the casual and 2D games on the PC, and then eventually to social network, and today to mobile. To me, these genres, while gaming is serving pretty much everybody from all gender and all ages, they are playing their own game in their own little genre on their own little device, right? Like the game I play on the console would never match with the game my wife play on the phone. But now really everybody is playing games. I think what will happen next is that we will have more games that could potentially encourage, including transgeneration and cross-generation and cross-gender audience to play together. And to me, that I always believe is that game industry has many good genres and many good brands, serving very targeted age and gender demographic, but we are missing the all age demographic and all gender demographic. Like what's a good game to play with your husband, between husband and wife? What's a good game to play between boyfriend and girlfriend? And I think that is the final frontier, and that's why we believing that the game industry would need someone who can be like a Pixar or Disney to unite all the people together and entertain them at the same time.
Genova, Soner, thank you for leaving us with these thoughts. You're both very seasoned gaming operators who've been instrumental to building some really successful IP. So thank you for sharing your thoughts and for joining us today. And that's a wrap.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
I'm Caroline Hyde for Bloomberg Television, and it is such a joy to be joined by Dan Sturman, of course, Chief Technology Officer of Roblox, a company that, Dan, you joined in January of 2020. And if we all just for a moment try and remember what January 2020 was like, but COVID was a murmuring that was happening only on the West Coast. And then you're joining this company must have been an extraordinary seizure of growth, because suddenly everyone very sadly gets locked in their homes, and millions upon millions of teens and preteens turn to you, to Roblox, and to your technology. Just take us back to that story a little bit.
Yeah, I will say I had absolutely no idea what I was stepping into. I joined a company, you're doing all the usual welcome to a new company thing, trying to figure out who's up and so on. And all of a sudden, like you said, the world's in a very strange place. People are turning to Roblox. Our load is going up. From an engineering point of view, systems are being strained and stressed in ways they never have been before. And by the way, we're also dealing with, rightfully, an employee group and a user group that's a little freaked out. So we have to be extremely empathetic as we're going through all of this as well. We're sending people home. So we're trying to go through this when people are used to be able to work face to face, and we're figuring out what remote work looks like at the same time. It was a challenging time, but at the same time, it was rewarding because we knew we were helping people out. Like I was getting emails from colleagues, thank you for being there for my kids.
Yes.
You know, and thank you for being there for me so I don't go insane because you're distracting my kids, you know. And we were seeing new uses of Roblox appear rapidly, not just with, you know, that kind of core demographic, but it was kind of one of our early accelerations into age up. We heard about people using it for school graduations, and other events when physical get together was rapidly disappearing and people didn't know quite how to use it. So it was a challenging time, but a rewarding time, and a very exciting time to join a company like this.
And Dan, of course, I mean, you very experienced veteran, having been at Cloudera before and at Google, but I'm interested in reminding us that for many, Roblox got put on the map at that point. But Roblox is since 2004 with maybe 10 then 100 users, a very different space, but tell us the history of its growth.
Yeah, so as you point out, I just joined in 2020, but Dave Baszucki and Eric Castle have been doing Roblox since 2004. And they really built this of a view they had learned at a prior company, which was if you give people kind of physical creation tools in a virtual space, people will play around with it. They'll explore, they'll create. And you know, it started with that physics simulation software and students building cars and crashing into each other. And they just took that idea, they added social interaction, they added avatar, but behind all of it was, how do we enable people to create and realize these experiences? And it's just been growing steadily since then. And yes, COVID added an interesting jump up in that growth, but it wasn't like it just appeared overnight. We had a really large community base before that, a really large base of creators, or we wouldn't have been able to do what we did during COVID, right?
And I think
so all that material, sorry, I was just gonna say, all that material is there. That community has been there, has been the bedrock of everything we've kind of gone through. It's just been building constantly over those years.
And almost it's sort of, therefore, many a parent sitting there getting their taste for understanding Roblox through their children, and almost it being demonstrative of what the metaverse is, because we're all clutching at trying to identify what this new word in our lexicon really means. We've been uttering it without really understanding it for a year or so, and then one company decided to rebrand itself as it is, and almost Roblox got put as a pinup. This is what the metaverse is. This is what life could look like in a more virtual reality. What do you make of that? Is it?
So yeah, we always have thought about this as a combination of shared and immersive 3D put together. So they're inherently social experiences, and unlike something, let's say, like, you know, a chat or a stream, you're not just experiencing this through text. It's 3D immersive graphics, and so you are walking around, flying around, interacting, moving through something. And we have found the combination of this being a social experience, you're doing it with your friends, and you're doing it in this kind of immersive world. There are a lot of other aspects, but that for us has always kind of driven the vision of being able to do that. And behind that's a lot of things. Well, you want physics that kind of simulate the real world. We need an economy backing that. We, of course, need communication. You need friend networks. A lot of things derive from those core two elements. But this is what we've always been doing. Then that metaverse term starts to become more popular. Obviously, the term was minted in 1991, but the term starts to get a lot of use. Our view is kind of we're just doing what we've been doing, and yeah, people are starting to understand that there's a new way of interacting that can be extremely powerful, particularly when you can't get to each other in person.
Powerful from a technological perspective too. So as CTO, what are some of the technical issues that go in and around an evolving space that more and more people want to come in and experience or enjoy or test out?
Yeah, well, part of the reason I came to Roblox, a big part of it is because the technical challenges and issues, it's for someone like me, it's like being a kid in a candy store. There are so many interesting things to work on. We do everything from how do we make the world as realistic as possible from both a physics and a graphics point of view? How do you do that while running on any device, from a high-end gaming PC to the hand-me-down phone a child may be given by their parents?
Mm-hmm.
How do you drive a virtual economy? And we were doing that before a lot of the current talk around virtual and online kind of currencies existed. How do you drive that and make it healthy and connect in an effective way, but a very kind of almost free market way, developers and users, and make sure people get paid for delivering real value? How do you keep the whole community safe? And how do you scale that safety? So it's really important with all our kids on the platform. We take that very, very seriously, but it doesn't just apply to kids. Generally, we're all kind of tired of toxic environments. So how do you make an environment safe and civil? And one of the big challenges we're looking at is, and how do you right size that based on who's participating and where they are and kind of where their mindset is at?
Yeah.
Obviously, a conversation between 3 adults is very different than between 20 kids in a game, right? And you have to right size that. So it's just almost, I could go on and on. There are just so many really deep technical challenges that we feel we're pushing the cutting edge on. It makes it a lot of fun to work here.
Let's talk about some of the more challenging natures and the fact that you are being asked to make a safe place for young people to play in, to live in, to experience, to go through teenagehood. And sometimes plenty of parents worry about their kids in the real world at that age. And now we're looking at worrying about in the virtual world too. Are there guardrails that you feel that you should be putting in place, or is it more that regulators need to as well?
No, we absolutely think there are guardrails we need to put in place, and we do every day. I mean, like I said, we've been doing this a long time. There's a lot of behavior that is really not allowed on the platform, from the way people can chat with each other. We're very protective of kids, to the sort of content that is allowed. I think we're in a pretty good place. It's never perfect. It's something we're always striving for, but as you might understand, it's an adversarial system. So we got to stay ahead of, people are actively trying to find ways around these things. So we're always working on refining that. Where part of the challenge comes in almost is, where is it okay to relax that? And that's kind of where some of our focus is. Like, how do we do a better job of making communication and content safe at kind of the base level for the most vulnerable communities? And then how, wherever it's appropriate, do we relax it, but do so in a way that doesn't violate that first principle?
Talk to us about that tension then. And also, immediately when we think of safe spaces online, everyone turns their attention to some of the negative press that the social media companies have got. And a lot of them have said, look, we're turning to AI in many ways. We're also turning to real people, real moderators, content moderators. And I know that's something that you rely on too. Who are these people? How are you employing them? Where are they based? What do they look like?
Yeah, so our moderator community are worldwide, which I think makes a lot of sense, because the moderation they have to do is worldwide. We build a lot of tools to assist them. We're generally careful about anything that, let's say, takes a punitive action, definitely has human eyes on it. We want to be very careful about that. But we do need to provide them tools. Like I said, it's an adversarial system. So for example, people will sometimes try to hide bad content in items through tricks around graphics. that isn't obvious if you just were to present the item one way, but then in experience it can change. So we have to build a lot of tools to help detect these sorts of things. But you know, these are good folk who spend a lot of time worrying about content and safety and experiences, and they're an intimate part of our family. And then our job is also to bring the tools to make their job as easy as possible, so that they can be as effective as possible. Because we also don't want to, you know, the other extreme is just slow everything down for safety. So we have to keep people's experience when everyone's doing the right thing really engaging, really exciting, without opening a door that lets bad content or bad experiences flow through.
And of course, there is a monetization element to all of this. And a lot of it is through the way in which people pay through you, Robux, as you mentioned already, but there's also slight advertising within it. And I know that that's been something you've been navigating too. How do you see about the safety of what young people consume when they're in your world?
Right. So, you know, we always want to be careful, I think, around monetization and well, anyone, children, but no one likes to be, we've all been bombarded by ads on websites. Like we've all seen this before. It's not really a pleasant experience. So as we think, for example, about advertising, first of all, advertising on Roblox, when we do that, will be very different. It's going to be, you could think of it as, you know, appropriate use of billboards, or maybe featured items, a pair of, you know, name brand shoes as an avatar item, or something along those lines. It's not going to be the splash screen in front of you sort of experience. We're still working on those modalities. And obviously, again, safety is an important element of that, and what our policies are there. Since we haven't launched anything yet, that's still all very much under discussion. But, you know, safety and civility are at the roots of this company. So it's almost every feature kind of goes through a process around what that looks like. Mm-hmm. It would be the same with anything around monetization. At the end of the day, there needs to be some monetization, because otherwise our content creators, they need the incentive to create the content too, right? Mm-hmm. It kind of goes both ways.
And of course, you have a lot of young people on the platform. You've also had older people get involved, as you said, and that's what was interesting in the COVID move and the new people that came to the platform. But you've already said that actually the job is not done yet with market penetration of the preteens and the younger. Where do you focus your attention at this moment when you're looking to keep growth sustained even outside of the world of COVID as we go back to normal life?
Yeah, so I think there's a few interesting avenues there. We've had just initial incredible success with a lot of these branded experiences and music experiences appealing to older audiences. Mm-hmm. There's even my own daughter who swears she won't be on Roblox, saw the Charlie XCX concert coming up, was like, oh, I'm gonna get on Roblox for that. And she had to say that, kind of eat some crow a little bit about all of this. And she's a college student. So we're really seeing the attractiveness there. We're also seeing, as we improve the fidelity, the graphics and the physics and the simulation nature of our experiences, we're seeing people take this in crazy ways, from more realistic games to some of the branded experiences, but also we've seen one experience that's around kind of psychological healing. We've even seen some techies get involved. I saw a viewer for Amazon Web Services appear on our platform. Again, we have nothing to do with building these. We just give the tools to people, and they use them in all sorts of different ways that we don't expect. And we're really seeing incredible innovation by aged up creators for aged up consumers, is the way I would think about it.
What more tools can you build? Where is your next iteration? How are you thinking about, if creativity takes you by surprise already with the tools you've given, how can you keep developing in that way and innovating?
Yeah, so I see a huge opportunity at Roblox, but in general, in the field of what I'll say is content creation, this is a place where machine learning techniques are really starting to advance and are very, very exciting. And what's exciting about that for us is, as we apply that sort of technology, it drops the skill level required to build on Roblox. Now, our skill level already isn't very high, as you know, any 12-year-old in a summer camp who's building their first coding on Roblox will tell you, but it can still be intimidating to someone who maybe has never really gotten into tech at all or something like that. So how do we make it so you could do things eventually like describe a world in text, and that turns into a graphical world for you, and you can modify from there. And maybe you're not actually coding, but you're wiring up components to make all this happen. And we have a huge catalog of things creators can pull from, created by other creators, and that allows them to quickly and rapidly put pieces together. So our overall goal is to just kind of continue to drop the skill level necessary to take whatever that imaginative idea you have in your mind for an incredible 3D experience and bring it to the platform.
And of course, 3D experiences is where we've all been sort of asked creatively to go ourselves. The idea that as we come into a more real world again, that actually our relationships have changed with the way in which we might work in the future, the way in which we might study, the way in which we might, me as a parent of young kids, great, maybe I don't have to go to a restaurant or a bar to see my friends, but I could do that virtually and have a similar exciting experience. That is the dream, the utopia of the metaverse. What do you think will actually be the reality in the near future?
Yeah, so for at least me personally, I don't see us replacing the real world at all. I mean, I think like many of us, as we get back into the office, we've missed these in-person experiences. But augmenting, it's been fantastic as a way to connect with people when they're around the globe, or you just can't get to the same physical space, or you don't want to hop on an airplane. We've experimented, like I said, with brands, with music as new things. We have within Roblox a mock-up of our office space so people can have in-work meetings in the metaverse. So I think it is a great augment for ways to just make everyone's life easier at the appropriate moments, without, in my mind, ever saying, hey, this is going to be better than the real world. And
is the access point, you said like you need to make these experiences great, from a hand-me-down phone to a great computer that a 12, 13, now maybe 25-year-old might have. But you see VR, like where do you see it going? Headset.
We absolutely see VR being an interesting way to consume these. I mean, it's already 3D. VR is incredibly immersive, and for certain sorts of experiences is a great way to experience them. I would say where we're at, though, is that is just one element, because you still want to be able to consume that through a phone, through a console, through a PC. Being able to consume this content anywhere, any way is extremely important in our vision and mission. And VR, we think, will be part of that. And possibly, we haven't really seen devices yet, but augmented reality will be part of that if that emerges. If there's a good way to consume these sorts of 3D experiences, we will be engaged on it.
You mentioned about the brand partnerships, the way in which you're looking at music events. And immediately, of course, we've dovetailed the world of metaverse. It's all come into our lexicon recently. And so too has crypto and the world of NFTs. We're all madly trying to work out what they were a couple of months ago. And now everyone's madly trying to undo that learning. I'm interested in your take of, as these peaks and troughs go with, in fact, the market for crypto, like Robux is what many people try to explain it as. How much do you think the market movement within crypto and now the drawdown that we see, will that impact your ability to do deals with like a Nike that wants to be involved in the NFT space?
Yeah, I don't really view those as connected at all. I think NFTs is an interesting technological step about what is it really? It's really in a public way sharing an agreement is the way I would think about what NFTs really are. There's a public contract anyone can introspect, understand, and in a sense augment or modify. I think that has some opportunities for a platform like Roblox as we think about how things move from on the platform to off the platform. Mm-hmm. Something with all these brands we're very excited about. Like imagine you bought a physical pair of Nike shoes. Mm-hmm. NFTs might be a very good way to do that, but we're still experimenting. We're watching the space. I'd by no means say the crypto space is mature yet. It just seems like very interesting technology, and we're experimenting with it. Many others are, and we're going to see where it takes us.
Where would you say the metaverse and your world is in terms of maturity?
Oh, we still have a long ways to go. I mean, our vision is so much farther out than where we are today. Yeah. I think the progress has been remarkably true to the vision here and Dave's vision for the platform, but we have so much more work to do. Keeps us very busy, but improved fidelity, different sorts of experiences, the ability to better integrate new sorts of contents. Like we're bringing voice to the platform, which is not something we really had before. We're bringing facial expression to the platform. there's all sorts of really exciting things going on. So we have a ways to go, but I think we're kind of staying true to the path. It's just, we can make this better and better each year.
And does the highs and the lows of the stock market even matter to you in that respect? You know, everyone put growth expectations on many a business, the stay-at-home darlings, as we call them, that perhaps were like, now in hindsight seem totally extraordinary, but you continue to deliver growth. It's just perhaps not the growth that some people had excitably baked in. How does that affect you? How does it affect morale? How does it affect your talent?
Right. So one of our core values at Roblox is to take the long view, and that's exactly what we do in an environment like this. We're staying focused on building long-term sustainable value. That's how this company has been run very carefully by Dave, you know, and we've never really looked at the quick win or the quick gain. We're continue to invest in areas that we're confident will allow us to continue that innovation. We are continuing to grow in almost every country around the world and continue to focus on age up. So that's going well for us. And then overall, you know, we still have a very healthy business. We have good cash flow. We have the resources to invest. And yes, the world's in a funny place from a financial markets point of view. That's something we always have to have empathy for our employees on and work with them on. But by and large, everyone here is very motivated by the mission. And we're just going to continue to just focus on that long-term mission. That's why people come to Roblox. That's why they're here. That's why I'm here.
And how do you see that mission in like 10 years from now? How do you see the global expansion? How do you see the use case expansion?
Right. And I think if I were to try to guess 10 years from now, that's hard for me to do because one of the benefits of our creator community is they constantly surprise us and do things we never would have expected. I love that about, like, we don't have to be the geniuses. They'll be the geniuses for us, right? But I really do think you will see much more besides the sorts of entertainment experiences we have and brands and music. You'll see education. You know, we want to take a school trip to virtual Egypt, and we're going to go do that through this experience and really immerse and not just see things, but interact with folks who are probably living the way they lived way back when, right? I see work possibly being part of this. And I see maybe a blend of kind of more adult activities like shopping or the equivalent hanging out bars, more social type experiences, but aimed at more about the social than about any game or pure entertainment in its own right. So I could see a lot of ways this goes. Advancements in hardware give us more ability to do things. There's just a lot of really fun things we could do over the next 10 years. Then I'll say, I predict in 10 years, this will be a tool we all use every day in some way.
Your daughter better get with the program.
That's right. That's right.
We thank you so much, Dan Sturman. What a fantastic interview. What a fantastic set of visions you paint for everyone. So thank you so much for giving us so much of your time.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Hey, Liz and Nick, great to see you. Thank you very much for doing this. I'm excited to speak with you today about how Discord and Rec Room are helping gaming become the new home for social interaction. The title of this is Gaming, the New Social Network. So really appreciate it. And I'd love to kick it off. Nick, if we could start with you and some history first in terms of giving your background. I think everyone knows what you've created with Rec Room, but nevertheless, it would be great if you took us back to 2016 when VR hardware was still nascent, and share the perspective you and your team had on coming from HoloLens that led you to start Rec Room.
Sure. Yeah, as you mentioned, I had been working on HoloLens with my 5 other co-founders, and we had been working on that since maybe 2011. So we were way too early. But I think the thing that we really took away from those new breed of headsets was it enabled something called social presence, which you had in video games before, but you had to a new degree with these headsets. You could really sense that there was another person behind the avatar. You could see their head movement, their hand movement. You could hear their voice in a way that really made it feel like they were in the same room with you. And as we saw the new VR headsets rolling out, we saw that there was a huge opportunity here to build a product that was really built around that social presence. And there was a huge opportunity for someone new to come in and do this because social density was so low on these platforms. You couldn't rely on your in real life friends being in a headset, playing the game that you wanted to play and online all at the same time. Really, the first generation of social experiences on these headsets was going to be about connecting strangers and trying to break the ice for them, trying to help new friendships form. And we felt like that was a really great opportunity for a new company to come along and build an entirely new social graph.
Great. And my understanding from Demir, who's spearheaded this investment for us, was that thank goodness that when we were chatting with you, you still hadn't shifted to go necessarily beyond VR. And so as a result of that, he was one of the investors that, while he assumed that you were going to expand beyond VR, was happy to do the round while you were still just focusing on VR.
Yeah, I think when we met with Index, we had started to take very tiny steps outside of VR. I think we had a couple playable prototypes on phones or maybe on Xboxes or PlayStations. And I think what we had seen was, you want to go where customers are. We believe that AR and VR will someday be as ubiquitous as many of the technologies that we take for granted today, but it's not there today. And how can you go and introduce your brand to people on the platforms and devices that they're on today? How do you get them started? How do you get them started to build their social graph, their inventories, their experiences inside of your platform, so that when they do get one of those headsets, they're already set up. They can just go and sign in Rec Room and continue that journey with their new piece of hardware.
Great. And speaking of VR, Liz, you were running sales and marketing around the same time for Oculus before joining Microsoft to lead the Xbox, or help lead the Xbox products. And we are so thankful that you decided to join Discord some months ago now as COO. I would love to hear your story of thinking of joining Xbox and really when you started to hear about Discord and how that thought process happened to decide to join Discord, the social network.
Well, Nick and I have some crossover because I actually joined Microsoft to work on HoloLens, and I spent about a year doing that, and then joined Xbox in 2018, which is around the time that I really started to hear a lot about Discord. I'd heard of it, but it really came onto my radar when I started in Xbox, because so many of my coworkers and so many of our customers were really enthusiastic and avid Discord users. And so that was what made me really recognize the power and the magic of Discord, was how much folks were using it. And I got introduced to Jason, and we got to know each other over a number of months. And as much as I loved working on Xbox, and I still am a huge fan of Xbox, and wasn't really looking to do something new, I was really excited by what Discord was doing, our mission, and then just the ability to take Discord from where it is today and bring that magic of Discord to more people. So I was very excited about the founding mission and the team, and then just our opportunity to bring it to more folks.
Super. My first question is around social interaction. And I'd love to ask both of you this. If you look at the sort of traditional social media versus what happens on gaming platforms, you now have 3 billion global gamers. You have attractions like the Travis Scott concert on Fortnite or Squid Games that go way beyond the originals or any other platform. And you have games that have been played for over a decade with unbelievable depth of experience and richness and engagement. So how do you think this compares to the other social networks that are out there? And how does this lead to a different type of experience that nevertheless is a social network in a lot of ways? Nick, do you want to start that?
Sure. Well, I would say one of the hallmarks that I think you see with games is you are having a new experience. So if you were to think through spending 2-3 hours scrolling through a legacy social media site, I don't think most people are forming a new memory. They're reliving old memories. And I don't think that I think they regret the time. I think most people that spend hours and hours scrolling through social media don't think back on it days later and think, wow, that was 2 or 3 hours really well spent. But we don't regret the time that we spend with people in the real world. Like if we go and grab dinner together, we don't regret that time. We consider that time well spent. I think what video games provide us is an opportunity to have closer to those in real life experiences, times where we can go meet up with someone that matters to us, have a new experience with that person and form a new memory. And I think it really speaks to something like deeply human, where we really do want to be spending time socializing with each other, not scrolling through a feed approximating a social interaction. And so I think that's one of the things that real-time social interaction, real-time chat, real-time voice chat, real-time playing together, I think those really do strike a different social need inside of people's brains. And so I think that's the area that you're seeing people gravitating towards these games experiences now that they've spent enough time on social media that they know that there's some social connection that's missing. I think games is starting to fill that in.
Yeah. How about you, Liz? What would you say about that?
My thoughts are similar to Nick's. I think that games and Discord are about actually connecting people and people spending time together and connecting with the people that they care about and having new experiences together. And I think video games create a real opportunity for folks to spend time together, to connect, to have a new experience, to spend time with their friends. And I think, Discord, unlike traditional social networks, is all about actually connecting people and for folks to be able to find belonging and find, quality connections, either with folks that they already know in real life or new people that they meet through common interests or common friends.
And so do you envision that it's sort of a starting point, the gaming is a starting point, and then there are just these human connections that get made and folks do whatever they want? I mean, in other words, it's really a free-for-all for what interests them as a group rather than playing a specific game?
Well, I think games are one way that people like to spend time together. And then you realize the people you play games with, you like to do other things with. You finish playing a game and then you decide to continue talking about something else. So I don't know if they're just a starting point, but they're a core experience that people really like to have together that creates connections that can then transcend the game and either translate into the real world or into other experiences. You find out that someone you play video games with, you have other interests in common with, or they're a person that you know in real life and that you have other experiences with them. You might be in a study group at school. You may also both be into some other hobby. You might both might be sneakerheads, and you end up talking about that on Discord.
Yeah.
also think the word gaming has expanded a lot in the last 20 years. I think if you look at what it meant, decades ago, it meant playing a platformer, it meant playing a first-person shooter. And I think what you see now is gaming is eating large parts of the consumer web. I mean, fashion, dating, events, music, concerts, these things are now moving into the gaming world in a way that was pretty unthinkable 20 or 30 years ago. So I think the word gaming has broadened a lot. What people mean when they say gaming has broadened quite a bit beyond I'm trying to level up or I'm trying to collect this MacGuffin.
Yeah. And the other aspect that is really interesting and why we wanted to talk to Discord and Rec Room together is your focus on synchronous communication, voice, video, versus a lot of the legacy social platforms out there that really focus much more on texting, asynchronous communication. Can you talk about how important that is for you and you think for the user over time?
I can. I mean, I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier. If you were to think about the most interesting memories that you've had over the last 6 months, you were probably doing something novel and unique, and you were probably with other people. No one's best memory of the last 6 months was scrolling through a feed, right? And so I think what we get with these synchronous interactions is you get real memories, you get real experiences, you get to deepen the connection with some other person. You're not asynchronously responding to something that they've done. And I think that's a really important part of human happiness. I think if you look at even the way that we punish people in this country, it's through solitary confinement. It's something that we know the human brain really needs, is this like synchronous connection with other people. And I think that's really what these platforms are trying to provide.
So Liz, I mean, I guess, you folks seem to be in just very clear agreement. So I'll push it a little further. If you're thinking about current social platforms that are the most popular today, are they legacy in the way that folks interact, and actually it will be more of a synchronous world where folks find their peers that share affinities and passions and want to interact in real time? Is that basically your view of how things are going to develop over time?
Well, I think the real-time aspect was missing. I don't know that it's going to replace asynchronous. There is a role for asynchronous. It is nice to see some asynchronous content. I think there's a role for that. What I would say is that asynchronous is probably too dominant now. And as Nick was saying, it's not very satisfying over time. What really is satisfying as a human is that I can have a conversation with someone. I can talk to them and connect with them. So I think that the roles of real-time kind of connection-based products was missing, and now it's coming to life with products like Rec Room and Discord, and I think they will play a bigger role in folks' lives. But I don't think that it will fully replace asynchronous, because I think, again, there's a lot of benefits to some asynchronous communications.
Anything you want to add, Nick, or you're okay with that?
I think if you look at like the models that are driving what content we're shown in asynchronous content right now, the goal is to get us to keep scrolling generally. Like that's what the business model is, like continue to scroll. And I think the role for asynchronous communication moving forward might be show us the content that's most likely to transition us to a synchronous moment. Show us the content that's most likely to show us an event we might want to go to, a friend we might want to connect with, or some content that we might be able to go and spend those synchronous moments with another person. So I think that's where I would see the role of asynchronous content moving forward is transitioning to that synchronicity.
And I also think that you even see synchronous messaging on what we're referring to as asynchronous platforms. If you watch folks on Instagram or on Snap, they're actually real-time messaging. They're using it as a real-time messenger because I think that just fundamentally people want to connect and they want to have conversations in real time.
Of course, the benefit of an asynchronous approach is the business model lends itself a lot more to advertising. because you can, sort of pool people and present ads in this infinitesimal scroll that you were talking about, Nick. So let's talk about business models a bit, about what you're focusing on and what you're not focusing on. Liz, how did you feel about when you heard that Discord was so opposed? I remember those conversations that we had, opposed to advertising as a core pillar of the business model. Did you scratch your head a bit and sort of say, like, I'm still plunging on this, or how did you feel about it?
No, it was actually the opposite. I wouldn't have joined if the model was advertising. So it was actually a big appeal for me. And I spent the last few years working on Game Pass, which is a subscription service. I worked previously on Dropcam, which was also a subscription service. So fundamentally, I'm very aligned to subscriptions as a really great way to align the interests of the customers and the products, and making a great experience that I think drives a great business, as well as creates products that are great for the world.
And Nick, you talked about previously this aha moment you had on the business model. Can you explain to us how that came about?
Well, I think
go ahead.
No, please.
I think our original idea for Rec Room was really to think about it being a platform for developers. So we were going to provide tools to allow professional developers to build rooms and objects inside of Rec Room. And I think it wasn't so much an aha moment. It was Rec Room really meeting reality. It was pretty unlikely that developers who have really tremendous tools and options on a bunch of other platforms with very broad distribution were going to come to our little tiny corner of the internet and build. At the time, we were a very small company, but I think the thing we saw was there was this desire among the players to have some role inside the game. What could they do to build? What could they do to create new content and distribute it on the platform? So our original theory was being a developer platform, and I think I'm very happy that we made the shift towards a user-generated content platform where the bulk of the content is made by the exact players who are inside the game. And I think it gives a new set of capabilities to a group that really didn't have distribution, that didn't have creation. And it set up a very different value proposition for anyone coming to Rec Room.
Nick, how do you think about the whole, I mean, there's been a 1.8 trillion of loss of value in NFT economy over the last 6 months. So how do you think of this whole world?
So Rec Room doesn't currently participate in the NFT world at all. We do sell digital goods.
That's what I mean, is that your digital goods for you folks is not something novel. I mean, it's the core of your economy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what the world probably looks like moving forward. I know during the early aughts, one of the things that was tracked by stock analysts a lot was what percentage of retail was digital versus physical. And my suspicion is over the next 10 years, one of the things we'll start tracking is what percentage of spend from consumers is going towards digital objects versus physical objects. And I think you're going to see more going towards digital objects moving forward. Whether those take the form of NFTs or whether they're, kind of the more conventional downloadable content that you've been seeing in games for decades, unclear to me what that looks like. I think the way we focused on it at Rec Room is try not to get enamored with the technology and try to focus more on what it is that the consumers want to do inside of your platform and provide that to them. So I think right now NFTs look like an interesting technology, but I don't know how it would materially benefit the players just yet. I think if we come to the conclusion that it could, I think we're open-minded to it.
And Liz, digital goods on Discord have also been something for that has been the core of the business model for a while.
Well, I wouldn't say that it's I think we think of our business model is really related right now to Nitro, which is a premium service. And that is around premium expression versus digital goods. And so I can express myself with premium stickers and emojis. I can stream in HD when I want to play games with my friends, and I can do some customization and really create a more premium experience. But I don't think we think of our business model as really around digital goods, but more around kind of what I would call sort of like premium expression or higher performance in the platform itself. And I think similar to what Nick said, we provide a platform for customers to have conversations and talk about the things that are important to them or things they care about. And so certainly there's folks on Discord that are talking about NFTs and digital goods, but we really look at ourselves more as creating spaces where people can connect around things that are important to them, and versus taking a position on any one of those things.
Okay, I guess you're hearing your investor talking about the fact that it feels like much ado about nothing for a long time when it comes to the gaming space, because when we think of how our investments related to the gaming world have monetized as platforms over time, we've seen it as digital goods. So whether it's a subscription or whether it's individual assets that are being bought or sold, we've viewed it as a digital good. So it's always had a great deal of logic to us when it comes to the gaming environment, but you've seen Index do very few related digital goods or NFT related investments in any other area as a result of that. Sorry, just had to add my 2 cents on this. Another area that I think is pretty important to talk about, which is controversial in social networks today, revolves around censorship and managing trust and safety for your users. And both of you, both of these platforms, I know you take it very seriously. As you scale, this is increasingly a problem. How do you think about creating guardrails in your communities to ensure the safety of your users? Could you talk about that?
For us, we really think about how do we create tools for the admins and moderators that are running servers and communities on Discord today. So it's a combination of providing, but we have both proactive and reactive tools. So we continue to invest in reporting tools, and then our safety team will take action on those. About 15% of our employees are actually dedicated to safety. We also look at how do we continue to invest in technology to automate some of that. And it's just an ongoing investment for us to create both, like I said, proactive and reactive moderation tools and programs.
Liz, I remember that another reason why you leaned in to Discord was that you liked the fact that the team was actually taking a stance and wasn't just a platform for freedom of expression, irrespective of what you wanted to say. And it's, obviously that is part of the reason why I think that Discord has been so attractive, but it also implies that there are many, many challenges to ensure that environment is kept that the environment is kept to those high standards as you scale.
I mean, we want our platform to be a safe and trusted place for our users. And so we need to continue to invest in making that the case, whether that's related to spam or content or behaviors on the platform. We have to continue to invest to make Discord the safe platform that it needs to be a great place for people to find belonging and to build communities.
Yeah. Nick, your thoughts on this?
I would echo a lot of the same points. I think the way we talk about it at Rec Room is, from the beginning, our goal has been to build a fun and welcoming community for people from all walks of life. And the best way that we feel like we can do that is trying to set the tone early and often. We think these communities are like crystals, and they'll grow out of the formation that's there before it. And so if you don't get it right from the beginning, it's very hard to correct. And anything you do early will pay dividends for you in the future. So the way that we've thought about Rec Room has been, from the very beginning, it's on an open platform for anyone to say or do anything. It's really focusing on that fun and welcoming tone that we want to strike. And the way that you continue to enforce that is through continued investment. You'll never be done with trust and safety work. Whenever you've solved one problem, another one has emerged. And I think just over time, you need to keep holding that investment as a really important part of making sure that the business lives up to the social mission that you have around trust and safety.
Last question. We're coming up on time. Thank you very much. And Nick, you sort of started to answer this one, but I might ask you for one more prediction. You talked about perhaps digital goods actually outperforming physical goods in terms of spend over time. I'm fascinated to see how that develops, but I'd love to hear one prediction from both of you on how you envision the gaming industry to develop over future years.
I think I'm going to continue to bet on the gaming continuing to eat the consumer web. I think the way that generations in the past explored the internet was largely through the browser, or something like AOL Instant Messenger. That was how I explored it. Come home from school, and that was the place that I went. And I think for this generation, you're going to see more and more people exploring the internet, meeting new people, exploring their own personalities, exploring how they connect to the rest of society, not through a browser, but through games, through gaming experiences. And I think you'll see continued, shopping, dating, events, music, sports. I think you're going to see more and more of that pulled into the gaming world, and what gaming means is just going to continue to expand. So that's my prediction. Over the next 10 years, everyone's going to be a gamer, and the amount of time that we spend gaming will continue to expand as well.
Liz, how about from your end?
Yeah, similarly, I think that with every sort of platform shift, and I think we are seeing a platform shift to online communities and to these richer interactions, it's essentially a new gaming platform. So there'll be a whole host of new types of social games that are well suited to folks gathering online. And so I think you're going to see, and I think we're going to see more what I would call high fidelity games transition to mobile, and that you don't have as big of a divide between sort of mobile games and PC and console games, that we see these sort of richer, higher fidelity experiences come to mobile. And then we also see these new kind of social games that really facilitate interaction for folks when they collect together online.
Well, at Index, we've always been interested in investing in gaming and entrepreneurs who are creating game-related companies, if you will, because we view this segment as sort of the pioneering segment for things that become pervasive and completely standard for many communities beyond the original adopters of it. And certainly if we look at Rec Room and Discord, it feels like this is what's happening right now. So looking forward to catching up with you in a few years' time. And thank you very much for doing this chat with us.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Manit, big welcome to the Index Gaming Summit. Really appreciate the willingness to do this. We catch up on Zoom every week, so I guess this is no different, except we're going to have a few other people watching this ultimately, but really appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me.
The topic today that we're going to discuss is one that I actually was amazed by in terms of your depth of understanding and just how forward-thinking you are. And it's not something I expected, given that this is the device that I originally learned about when we first met. And the topic is cloud gaming and how that's turning into such a transformational topic in gaming. But before we dive into that, would love to just start at the top by having the viewers maybe get a little bit of a background on yourself, on what Backbone is, and we can go from there.
Sure thing. So Backbone is the leading platform for cloud and core gaming on mobile devices. So you can imagine I'm dyed-in-the-wool proponent of cloud gaming. Basically, we make universal devices that you can connect to your phone, and in a matter of seconds, you can start playing games like Halo Infinite or Diablo Immortal. Our products are sold in major retailers like GameStop and Best Buy, and you can use them for everything from native App Store content to also major streaming platforms like Xbox Game Pass. And then we have a software component as well that acts as sort of a feature-rich home for gaming, as well as a community for players. So, cloud gaming has like a sort of long and storied history, and the term's been bandied about for many years. It's not really like a novel idea per se, but it really gained a lot of currency back in 2012 to 2014 with, Gaikai and OnLive receiving a pretty significant amount of venture funding. But what's really changed now is it's sort of going through a renaissance or watershed moment, because a lot of the first-party companies, and not just gaming companies, but kind of technology companies at large, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, NVIDIA, have been investing billions of dollars in capital in getting to the consumer experience to become really good. And I was kind of exposed to it in that capacity at YouTube, kind of being in the right place at the right time, where there was a really small group of people back in 2018 that knew about the technology being developed at the data center level to essentially let you stream games to any device in your life.
Amazing.
And it was kind of around that time that I basically got to see a very early demo of a AAA game running on an Android phone. And that was really the aha moment for me when I basically got to see, a game like essentially GTA 5 running on a smartphone. And I was so in awe of it. And I think, John Carmack, the CTO of Oculus, he kind of describes the experience of playing on the Quest for the first time as kind of like experiencing religion on contact, where you just want to tell 10 people about this, like, oh my gosh, I just tried Rec Room in VR. But I think the experience of playing a game like Halo on your smartphone for the first time is equally, if not more shocking. And that was the experience that I had.
Yeah. Zooming out, I'd love to just talk a little bit about cloud gaming from a technology perspective. Maybe you can just run us through how it works, right? And I think the big critical question related to the technology is specifically latency. So maybe you can just give us your quick overview on how all of that is developing.
Sure. So cloud gaming at a high level is basically just the notion of streaming a game from a remote server to any screen that could be interesting to a consumer. And we're kind of moving from this sort of like device-centric model of playing games and divorcing ourselves away from that into this user-centric one. Sort of like what's happened with music streaming. With Apple Music and Spotify kind of brought music to the cloud, and similarly Roku, Netflix, HBO, etc., brought TV streaming to the cloud. And you can kind of imagine a similar thing is now occurring with gaming. What's kind of taken longer is that the fact that it kind of all has to be real time and synchronous and very low latency for the experience for a consumer to actually be worth it as compared to using native local processing power to play a game. And with cloud gaming in particular, I was at YouTube in 2018, and that was a really fun place to be at the time, because YouTube's kind of formed a consistent through line in a lot of major behavioral shifts and disruptions in the games industry, starting with galvanizing basically content creation for gaming as we know it back in 2007-8 with like Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, and the idea of putting a video of yourself playing a game on the internet up was sort of a new concept at the time. And then again, it happened with esports, and in a somewhat weird way, the technology, as it turns out, little did anyone know, that was being used to stream video at low latency to many, many people around the world, billions of people, could also be leveraged to stream games to many people. And so could that institutional knowledge that had been built up at these large technology companies. So that's sort of the basis for it.
Yeah, I think it's a really provocative thought. I interned at Activision back in the day, and the thing that always shocked me about Activision's business model is that they defined it on a boxes sold basis, right? On a units sold basis. That's what, up until the recent few years, that's how gaming KPIs were set within the large studios, is launch a title, invest, tens to hundreds of millions of dollars in developing that new title. And then you put it on shelves, either physical or virtual, and you sell units and you hope that you recoup way more than the original investment. And then you start that process all over again. And so the thought of totally redefining game distribution by making games instantly accessible and turning them into live services, I think is truly like the crux of what cloud gaming is enabling, and why I agree with you that it's a really transformational moment that's about to happen. I guess as a next topic, I'd love to get your sense of what end platform actually benefits. You already mentioned that we're shifting away from thinking about gaming at a device level, right? It's not about just playing games on a PC versus a console versus a phone. Theoretically, the same game can be experienced across all of those platforms instantly. But I'm curious what your view is on how the different platforms are going to benefit. Like, is gameplay going to shift towards one more than the other as a result of games being so much more accessible? Curious to get your view.
We have to be careful, of course, to make sure not to conflate the business model with the method of distribution. In this case, cloud gaming is really like a means of distribution that can allow you to access really any screen without the intermediation of a console or dedicated gaming host device. As far as which devices specifically will benefit, there's not really a clear consensus on this because we're still really in the early days of this market. I forget which famous venture capitalist clipped this, but someone said something along the lines of, cloud gaming has been perennially 3 years away, which you can imagine the situational irony when it is actually like a single-digit number of years away, probably. And so it's not necessarily obvious which ones are going to benefit, but at Backbone, we're mostly interested in mobile because we view that as the premier TAM expansion opportunity, where you can take gaming from essentially hundreds of millions of console owners to the 3 billion people that play games on mobile devices, but they play games more akin to Candy Crush.
I'm curious to talk about that some more. I think you're alluding to maybe a bit of a mix shift in terms of what genres are popular on mobile. And I guess the question I'd ask you is, are you convinced, or how convinced are you that people want to play, AAA like titles like Call of Duty on the phone versus, more casual games, which have really dominated mobile in the past?
Yeah, so there's no single widely held view on this within the industry, and in fact, there's multiple camps. One such camp sort of firmly believes, and is firmly rooted in the belief, that local processing power will just continuously outpace streaming technology. Tim Sweeney, Matthew Ball, who's known for kind of popularizing the term metaverse in the sort of popular lexicon, both kind of have this view. And so the question is, will a core gamer opt to play a stream game over the native solution or native counterpart when both options exist? But I think most people would probably agree that streaming is going to have some impact, some significant impact on the industry. The question is just, the extent to which that impact will exist. And in particular, in the US markets, where there's really high console penetration and density, you can imagine that it'll be more of like a second screen experience for those types of players, where they can take their experience kind of outside the confines of the living room and play Xbox or PlayStation games or Steam games kind of anywhere that they want on the devices that they care about. And in markets that don't have console penetration, I think you'll see much more adoption.
Yeah, and just to play it back, I think the way I'm interpreting what you're saying is, in the US, a lot of console owners already exist, and it's already a trained behavior to play Call of Duty on an Xbox or FIFA on your PlayStation. And so you're going to supplement that core gameplay with, playing those titles on your mobile phone, but it might not necessarily replace that gameplay on those devices. Whereas in other geographies where people don't have consoles, there's much higher potential for the actual mobile experience to be the primary gameplay experience for that user. Is that a fair playback of what you're saying?
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
So I'd love to also just go back to the technology side a bit more. Like I'm curious, you mentioned cloud gaming is always 3 years away. Is that your current view on how far away it is, or how imminent is this this trend?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's ongoing, and we're definitely a single-digit number of years from it being a sort of consumer mass market phenomenon. Again, there's kind of bitter disagreement on what exactly that timeline will look like. Phil Spencer has been on the record saying, it's years away, and by years he means like years and years away. I guess specifically with cloud gaming, the real bottleneck has always just been the experience, right? The latency end to end, and latency you can kind of put into two buckets, right? There's latency on the input side, latency on the network side. On the input side, there's a lot of incredible improvements going on the input device level, at the mobile operating system level. Browsers, for example, WebKit's seen a lot of improvements in terms of like input device support and lowering the latency and barrier to entry there. And similarly, you can imagine that for the network side, I mean, that's really kind of a Google, Microsoft, Amazon problem where it's really just a question of having data centers close to people's houses.
So when, not to be too provocative, but I'm curious, like, when do you think the strong consumer adoption of these cloud gaming services is going to begin? I know Backbone itself is not a cloud gaming provider, but is instead choosing to partner with providers of those services. But since it is a big part of your strategy, I'm curious just how you view consumer adoption developing.
Yeah. Consumer adoption, even this year, has kind of blown past all of our expectations internally. There's not actually one kind of monolithic or unified view around whether cloud or native gaming will supersede one or the other. But what we have seen is that, I mean, Microsoft has gone on the record and said almost half of all Game Pass subscribers are playing Xbox Cloud Gaming, which is kind of a remarkable feat considering that the service is still in beta and it launched less than a year ago on iOS and iPadOS. So, it's a relatively early days, but we've still seen like strong consumer adoption, and Game Pass, is growing incredibly fast.
I'd love to go back to the framing that you mentioned earlier in the conversation. You talked about, how YouTube emerged many years ago and hosted videos on the internet and allowed people to access them at low latency. And then obviously video streaming emerged, TV streaming emerged, and we're able to watch, the Netflixes, even live sports digitally instantly. And now we're headed towards being able to access gaming content in the same way. I'm curious if there are any other parallels that you see between TV streaming and game streaming and how it ultimately developed. Are we going to have 20 different game streaming apps, on our devices the same way that we might have, Netflix and HBO and Showtime and all the TV streaming providers? Curious just how you envision that consumer experience unfolding.
Right. So it seems like there's certainly going to be more consolidation within gaming specifically. And there's also network effects to these platforms, right? If the technology becomes commoditized and, in every good consumer experience, the technology itself becomes ambient, hopefully players in 2 or 3 years don't really need to know what cloud means to have a good experience. Although that is kind of where we are right now in its incipient stages. But if the technology itself is kind of commoditized, then there are other things that are going to matter. And some of these platforms have network effects, right? You have friends on Xbox and PlayStation and these platforms. So these gaming services actually offer more than just content, but also, community.
Yeah. Makes sense. And I'd love to tie back to just how you see Backbone's role developing around this. You mentioned earlier that the technological development of cloud gaming is kind of two facets, right? It's latency coming down on the input side and then latency coming down on the network side to truly enable like the method of streaming this content. You're obviously playing a big role in reducing latency on the input side yourself and making it more seamless for a consumer to play this type of content. Just curious, like how else do you see Backbone playing a role around this broader theme?
Sure. So right now we partner both with gaming platforms like Xbox as well as publishers themselves like Activision, Blizzard. We view it as sort of a multi-pronged approach in terms of like bringing cloud gaming to mass market. There's really, I guess, also two sort of sides to this problem. There's on one hand, the user education problems, and on the other hand, the user experience problems. Now, fascinatingly enough, if you were to go to an average consumer right now, Demir, and you were to tell them, hey, if you go on your smartphone, you can basically play Halo Infinite like in the browser in less than 30 seconds. You'd explain that to an average consumer, they'd probably be dumbfounded. And if you were to explain that to a core gamer, they would probably be caught so furiously in the tangles of their own disbelief that they would probably look at you mistrustfully and say something along the lines of, hey, I tried this thing. I tried streaming 3 or 4 years ago. It was a really shoddy experience. And they probably, say something along those lines. So you can imagine that it's kind of an uphill battle to convince consumers that this is actually a reality and the technology is finally there, but it will happen inexorably. On the user experience front, we're talking about, again, things like latency, the experience of getting into the game, making that really seamless, making the wait times low, because on mobile, if it doesn't happen in less than a few seconds, it's really going to erode at consumers' patience.
I'd also love to talk about one other form of, somewhat related, like cloud gaming, which candidly I wasn't educated on until you kind of educated me on Backbone and its capabilities, and that's remote play. Mm-hmm. So we talked about latency, right, which is games being streamed from a server somewhere far away and increasingly closer as the Googles and Amazons build their data centers closer to where the demand sits. But if you have a console, you already have that server close to you, right? I'm actually staring at my Xbox right now and it's 20 feet away from me. I had no idea I could stream gameplay from my Xbox to my mobile phone and with a Backbone controller, then play FIFA, which is my game of choice. How interesting is that method of gameplay to you? Do you see that specific behavior also taking off? It may even be a true precursor to true cloud gaming.
Yeah, I think it is a precursor in many ways. And it's also worth just mentioning that unlike the TV streaming space, these services aren't really homogeneous. They have a lot of different unique traits and attributes, right? NVIDIA's service basically allows you to stream games that you already own to devices that you care about. Xbox has both, the Game Pass element to it, and they've also publicly announced that they're going to allow you to stream games that you already have the entitlements for. So if you bought a game on your Xbox through the cloud. So there's many different facets to each of these services, and they can't be all compared one-to-one per se. Remote play is a kind of really fascinating epiphenomenon where you basically can take your console games and stream them to your smartphone, and the experience can actually be quite good for a lot of players, especially with the next-gen consoles, the PS5, Xbox Series X and S.
Amazing. I'd love to shift into the last big topic. We've talked a lot about the consumer experience, this technological trend that is cloud gaming, but we haven't actually talked too much about the content itself. I'd love for you to maybe address the game developers who are watching this. This trend is happening. It's going to pick up speed. What are the things that they need to keep in mind when they think about actually creating the gaming IP itself?
Right. One of the cool things about cloud gaming is right now, if you have access to Microsoft's game development kit, you can actually if you're building a game for Xbox, you can test and see how it feels on a mobile device at the very least. And that's not a high friction thing to do. So I think even just getting to try your game on different platforms is a pretty awesome thing. And even cloud gaming as a development tool is certainly going to unlock a lot of cool experiences. Knowing that your game is going to run on a 5-inch or 6-inch screen is a good opportunity to go and think about what can be done to kind of optimize for that use case. I also have kind of, two aspirations and hopes, if you will, although there's the yawning gulf between expectations and reality. But I certainly hope that game developers can explore more cross-platform games that support crossplay specifically with mobile. The games that have managed to execute specifically on this trend have been true forces of nature. You look at Fortnite, Roblox, Rec Room, Minecraft, a couple of which are index investments as well. Those games have just seen incredible growth. And I think a large part of that is due to the fact that they chose not to pursue kind of mobile specific monetization and create a mobile specific version or variant of the game. The second thing that I'm also really excited about, and this is probably years in the future, although people can start thinking about it now, is the notion of cloud required games, where you can basically use the compute in the cloud to do things that simply weren't possible on local hardware. And I think that's really where some of these opportunities kind of shine through brilliantly with the cloud. We're talking about really lifelike graphics or artificial intelligence or things like that. Now, graphics are not the sine qua non for making a great game, but you can still create really immersive experiences that weren't possible before.
Yeah, I think the the cross-platform aspect that you mentioned really sticks out to me. I think just going back to earlier in our conversation, right, that the learning that I had from Activision, I actually caught up with the CFO of Activision, I think 6 months ago or a year ago, and he reiterated just how important this mindset shift is from going away from boxes sold to thinking about these like live services and prioritizing KPIs like daily active users and monthly active users and percentage monetizing users. And I think that's still an early shift in and around how game studios are run, right? That shift from boxes sold to live ops. I also love the consumer impact that cross-platform can have, right? Truly democratizing gameplay. I remember being a kid and having to go to that one friend's house who has a PlayStation 2. Not everyone could afford one or get one. And so now we live in this world where, you know, regardless of what device you have, you can connect with your friends and play the same games and, you know, make the same memories. So, so much fun stuff ahead, both on the IP side and then also just how all these experiences are tied together, I think. I guess the last question I have for you, Manit, is world is changing so quickly, especially in gaming. But do you have any last predictions on what we might see play out in the years ahead?
Yeah, I think it's really those two, I guess, hopes that I shared. I really hope to see these sort of cross-play games with mobile specifically. It's very hard to execute on, but when it's done correctly, it creates these remarkable shared experiences where, you know, like you shared, you know, you go to your friend's house, there's only a single Xbox, it can only run a game, doesn't support split screen, and you can join them on your iPad or iPhone or on a secondary or tertiary screen, and you can actually play together for the first time, which is, you know, seems like a trivial thing, and we should have solved that long ago in gaming, but is actually a pretty incredible one. And cloud is certainly helping achieve some of that for free, but with you know, games that are native on mobile, there's a really big opportunity. And then secondly, with these games that take advantage of the cloud, I really hope to see more of those in the future. I think, you know, probably years away, but when that does finally happen, I think there'll be a lot of exciting user experiences that just simply weren't possible before, like, you know, large scale combat or really impressive like shared multiplayer games.
Yeah. Well, I also have a prediction to add, which is that I think we'll see, and I hope we'll see, tens of millions of backbone devices in use around the world. And I know you know, you have amazing plans to play a role in everything that we just discussed. Well, thanks, Manit, for all the amazing perspectives that you shared during this session. You know, I know Backbone is going to play a huge role in all of the trends that we talked about, and looking forward to chatting about all of this more.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dean Takahashi, and welcome to our Web3 gaming session here. And I'm the lead writer for GamesBeat at VentureBeat. I organize the GamesBeat Summit event and the Into the Metaverse events as well. And I'm here, happy to be joined by Ryan Wyatt, who's the CEO of Polygon Studios, and Jeff Zerlin, also known as Jiho, the co-founder of Sky Mavis and the maker of Axie Infinity. So I'm sure some people here are already familiar with you two, but I wonder if you want to say a little bit about, I guess, the company and how you got to this point, I guess. So let's start with Jeff.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dean. It's really awesome to be here. So yeah, I'm Jeff, or Jiho. I'm a co-founder of Sky Mavis. We invented Axie Infinity. Yeah, I grew up collecting insects and fossils. The first thing I ever did, and playing games. And so the first thing I ever did on the internet was play StarCraft with my Korean cousins that were halfway across the world. So I think from an early age, I knew that games could be a great way to introduce people to new technologies. And a lot of the Axie early team members, community members, and founders were actually early to NFTs. And around 2017, we saw experiments happening like CryptoKitties and thought, hey, like this is a really interesting way to bring digital ownership, free markets in a sense, to game economies. A lot of us had actually grown up playing video games where it was actually simultaneously very easy to make money monetizing your time in game, but also very hard. Easy because there was actual substantial financial demand for these in-game assets, but very hard because you were constantly skirting terms of service violations. There were no financial rails that actually allowed for trustless transactions between people, in different parts of the world. So yeah, this idea that, okay, like NFTs could radically change gaming, that was actually very clear to a small group of people in 2018. And then it was like, okay, like, how do we actually build a brand that people will love to engage with? And right, like things like Pokemon and Tamagotchi instantly came to mind. And I think that was really the mission, is, okay, how can we bundle something that's this new technology that's a little bit scary and complicated with something that's nostalgic and reminds you of the games that you played growing up. So yeah, that's kind of really what started as the seed or the kernel of our mission. And yeah, 4 years later, we're still building. Axie is the #1 NFT project of all time, with over $4 billion in total traded volume. There are over 2.5 million unique addresses that own Axies. We have around 600,000 daily active users. And yeah, we've built infrastructure as well, like the Ronin sidechain, which is built to basically accommodate our growth needs. And yeah, so we've kind of built a lot of things in house as well along the way.
And Ryan, you had a very interesting and good position over at YouTube Gaming, and were very successful there. And then took this dive into blockchain things. And I'm curious what inspired you to do that, and what you found now that you're at Polygon Studios.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So my whole career was always around creator economy before the creator economy was a thing, right? I played competitively in esports tournaments, commentated, streamed content on Justin TV, got to really build and focus on what the creator economy was going to look like, from how we worked with creators, how creators inevitably started to monetize, what products you build for them to support an ecosystem outside of ads, how you think about building an infrastructure at scale to support, hundreds of thousands of creators across an ecosystem. And so I just really enjoyed that. Like, I had a blast doing that. I would say I did do that, and it was ready for something else that was a new challenge in the space, something that excited me and something that interested me. And so I looked at kind of like Web3 as this really interesting opportunity to jump into the game space, where there was like a really unique factor of, democratization of game development. I saw this collision of, us spending more time and money in digital assets in a digital world within the games industry, and thought about like, what are the dynamics that are going to change over the next decade that'll be really interesting. So when I jumped out of Web3, my point of view is over 10 years, right? Because if you looked at it, and we had this conversation when, the early days of the creator economy, 99% of people I spoke to was like, who's going to watch people play video games? It's like so stupid of an idea. Like people play video games, they're not going to watch them. So when we try to sell esports into the big game publishers, they're like, what a waste of time. Nobody wants this, right? That obviously proved wrong. They all ended up leaning into that. Obviously, the creator economy ended up being a pretty big thing and actually did a great job, I think, helping grow the games industry overall. So I just find this space to be really fascinating. It's unexplored, all things considered. There's a lot of new challenges. I like just tackling challenges and looking at different opportunities. And so from my perspective, it was fun to do a pivot into a different thing within the gaming industry, right? And there is no shortage of skeptics, no shortage of problems that need to be solved, no shortage of opportunities to create early product market fits. And this is fun to me, right? Like I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I'm so glad that I made the jump over, and I loved my time at Google. It was like, what a great time that I had. I learned a lot, got to contribute a lot, super grateful for my time there. But at the same time, YouTube gaming is the biggest gaming platform in the world, billions of users are using gaming every day. It generates billions of dollars. It just was like time to go do something different. I kind of felt like I had climbed the top of the creator economy mountain and was ready to get my hands around something else. I'm an operator at heart. And so this space was well suited. And I'm totally into like, let's figure out where the next 4, 5, 6 years takes us. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, let's get to those sort of skeptical views. I guess we're in that bear market now, and last year we saw huge progress in this category, and billions of dollars flowing into it, and lots of startups being created. I know Drake Star had said even in the first quarter, about a third of all fundings that went into games were blockchain related, and about 187 blockchain game companies got funded in Q1, and that was at a time when some of this tech malaise was already starting, I think, and the larger U.S. venture capital market was starting to decline already, but games was still doing well. But in this bear market, where we've seen the price of Bitcoin fall, we've seen inflation, we've seen larger economy get into trouble. What makes you think that, say, this market will stay strong, or if it doesn't stay strong, like what's the right path then to survive? I guess
I think the market will stay strong long term. I think this is going to be a pullback that we see where it's going to start to unveil what is real versus what is not. Like, I think there are a lot of people that just started building, and now we're going to see what is actually, like, what are the true fundamentals, what products are actually coming to light. And I think it's a good test for the market. And I do think this downward pressure, although it's unfortunate, it impacts millions of people's livelihoods. So you have to handle this conversation with a lot of tact. And I know this is an opportunity for skeptics to kind of be delighted in what's happening in the macro markets, but I try to just stay even keel on both sides of these things. The other reality is you've seen billions of dollars being deployed into the games industry. You have not even seen a fraction of those games yet, right? And so we talk about, like, what is it going to be on the other side? There are a ton of games that are backed by the largest, most prestigious venture firms in the world that have not come to light yet, that are Web3 games. So I do think what you're going to see is a lot more games coming to market that will showcase the uniqueness of what you can do in Web3 games. And I think that's a big question that a lot of people ask, like, how are people going to use this? What does actually blockchain app development do? What are things that you can do in Web3 that you can't do in Web2? And I think a lot of these conversations have been coming up. You really have to point to, like, products in order to be out there in market. And so my excitement and enthusiasm is long-term. There's an opportunity to, like, put your head down, build and add value. And on the other side of this, deploy products that are exciting and delighting for those that are going to be entering Web3 for the first time.
And Jeff, how about you on the bear market, I guess?
Well, first I want to say that bear markets are never easy. This is actually my second bear market. And right, it's tough. Like last time, 2017, I kind of came into this space bright-eyed. ETH was whatever, $1,100, and came down all the way to 70. I think Sky Mavis, well, it wasn't called Sky Mavis back then, but our team had around $20,000 in the bank. People weren't getting paid, right? It's a very painful experience. That's the reality, and that's the kind of interesting consequence of commingling Web3 and gaming, right? Because traditional gaming is is recession proof. Right? Actually, people and consumers tend to spend more on traditional gaming during a recession, right? Because it's a nice way to relax and get your mind off of things. And with Web3 gaming, right, there's this kind of wealth effect that happens when people are, feel like crypto prices are going up, so then they're more willing to spend on collector's items and things like that within these economies, right? So it's a little bit more interlinked. But what I believe is happening long term is that our digital lives are starting to become more and more important relative to our physical lives. And is that a trend that stopped, in the last couple of months just because the macro environment, because the Fed started raising rates? Did that trend actually stop? No, right? Like we might have had a pause or a consolidation in that trend. In my opinion, actually, right, like COVID ending and people like going outside and stuff like that, that was actually, right, like the catalyst for this kind of short-term pullback in gaming and, the metaverse theme. But long term, right, like I think everyone is aligned that, okay, people are going to be spending more and more time in front of screens and getting a lot more of their fun, their status, their social connections from these digital environments more so than physical environments. So yeah, that, I think it's written. It's just, timing is always, a little bit tricky.
Yeah. You guys may be different, but when I sort of look into the subject of NFTs and blockchain, I have these great arguments with myself about all the pros and cons. And I wonder what within those sets of arguments that you've heard over and over again, I guess, what to you feels like sort of one of the most important debates that happens, within this space? And to me, like just my impression, there is a lot of talk about centralization and decentralization, and that what we have in effect is actually a different kind of centralization rather than decentralization within this Web3 space, where we have different entities like, say, OpenSea possibly becoming the marketplace that disrupts the other app stores, but it's still a centralized entity in some ways, right? And then the other thing I think will be the big opportunity is that when you're not paying those fees to those stores, and you're not paying all this money for user acquisition, then you do have this great opportunity to share back more of those proceeds with the users, right? And that the business model could be very, very appealing in that way. Those are a couple of things that I just sort of gravitate to, but I don't know. Let's start with Jeff on this one.
So in terms of like the decentralization versus decentralization debate, I tend to think of it in terms of, we're starting to see the rise of these grassroots communities that are starting to align incentives with the developers of these Web3 products. And I always, we've been at the forefront in terms of calling Axie a digital nation, right? So if you actually start to look at these communities and their relationships with these applications as the rise of these nations, actually, I think you're going to get an entire spectrum of types of governments, right? You're going to have some products and communities that are more aligned on the Athenian model, and then you're going to have some products and communities that are more in the Spartan model, right? Or maybe the modern day terms, right? Singaporean Lee Kuan Yew versus a pure democracy, right? So
I mean, sorry to interrupt a little, but one of the good things I see there is that you seem to be able to locate your primary customers much more easily because they're already coming to your Discords, right? They're like the whales that, otherwise in the ages of mobile gaming, you had to fish for them and you had to spend all this user acquisition money. And then you'd find maybe the 2% of people that would ever pay you anything at all. Right. And that seems so inefficient, whereas you have communities that are coming to you.
I think that, of course, yeah, user acquisition, especially in the early days, has been a little bit different. But I do think that most industries start from a very grassroots place. I think of it as kind of like a political campaign, right? In the beginning, you need a lot of like grassroots organizers, and you need to figure out ways to unlock their true potential. But then once, okay, like the campaign has gotten some momentum, you get some funding, and then you try to figure out, how do you scale campaign spending to increase your reach and broaden the strength and size of your movement. So I do think that UA will also play a role in Web3, and it'll be more like adding oil to a raging fire. So, and that's one of the things that makes me incredibly bullish on the size and scale that this industry will eventually get to.
Okay. And Ryan, any quick one from reaction from you there too?
No, nothing to add to that.
Okay. So I do wonder, like, who are going to be the mainstream gamers that take us, to sort of a much higher scale of gaming, I guess. You're at 2.5 million, which is awesome, I guess, in this space. But how do we get to the 10 or 20 or 100 million, the really big audiences?
You need more games that are like, if you think about it right now, there's a relatively small subset of games in Web3. Polygon has like 280 some games, right? And you're just now, some of the games that are going to be on the horizon in the second half of this year, like games like Delysium and so forth, that are coming out that are much more AAA polished. Like, you need some of those games to come out, because if you look at a lot of the top creators on Twitch and YouTube gaming, look at the games that they're playing. They're playing largely games that have large user bases attached to them, right? And they have to play that because that's how they're going to draw their best chance of driving viewership, right? But there's a little bit of like a chicken and egg thing here, is like, which one's going to come first? And you see games like Among Us that gets driven out of nowhere from the creator, economy. And so I think there needs to be far more products available to the general gamer, right? It's a pretty daunting onboarding process right now to Web3, right? It's like, how do I buy crypto? How do I use it? What does staking mean? What's an L1 versus L2 mean? What does this game do? What's the barrier to entry? I mean, there's a lot of what I would call critical user journeys that are very flawed in Web3 right now, right? And so it's going to take a variety of things, of people working on many different fronts to reduce friction, to allow the on-ramps to be much easier, and to have games that resonate more. Like, if you look at a lot of the games, like even me, the irony of it is, a huge gamer, there's not one Web3 game right now that is really drawing me in and playing on a day-to-day basis. But I totally believe that there will be, right? There will be a tactical shooter that I enjoy, that I'm going to be able to play and all of a sudden start participating in. And so I think that's where it starts to happen. Because the other thing that's really interesting is, I think the economics for content creators, let's call YouTubers and Twitch streamers in this, we don't, confuse the word of content creator. I think the economics are going to be so much better for them when they find games that actually genuinely resonate with them. How they can actually get participation and ownership of the actual game and IP is huge. How they can, like, instead of just getting this check to be an Activision, a Call of Duty streaming partner, right, to stream X amount of times and do X amount of commercials, right? That's going to start to change, where they're actually going to be aligned with the incentives of the game long term. And so all of a sudden, creators will have a completely different perspective on the space. The other thing too is, like, Web3 games is not going to be for everybody. We talk far too much in absolutes on this thing. There's 3 billion gamers. It's okay if only a fraction of them play Web3 games. Like, we need to stop talking on both sides. Like, Web3 games, if it doesn't take over the entire industry, is a failure. It's like, it's okay if it serves 10, 20% of the entirety of gamers around the world. That's a great, so, you're talking, hundreds of millions of people that get to play and participate in a new subsection of the games industry. So my biggest issue that I have with all of it is how much, like, gatekeeping we love to do. It's like, oh, Web3 games, like, blah, blah, blah. Let people play what they want. Let people create and develop what they want. It's always been the beauty of the games industry. And so, like, you have so much optionality as a gamer too. You want to play single player narratives, you can. You want to play mobile games, you can. You want to go play crypto games, you can. So I think that's my big thing on all of this too, is allow these things to play out and allow gamers to participate in what they want. And a lot of the backlash that you see around NFTs with gaming is actually pretty well positioned, and rightfully so, by the critics, right? If you think about a lot of the core issues it's like, I don't see games that appeal to me. I see predatory practices from NFTs across the space. It's like, true. I see chains that actually are not carbon neutral. That's problematic from a point of view, right? And so you have to let the dust settle on these things and see who's going to resolve these core issues, right? So I'm actually really optimistic that time resolves a lot of these things and will eventually show itself in it. And that's kind of like where I am orienting myself around right now.
And believe it or not, we already hit our time limit. But Jeff, I do want to give you a last word there on getting to the mainstream. Any thoughts in addition to Ryan's?
So I think one of the issues that we've seen is that, okay, like you can have this first wave of adoption, which is driven by hobbyists and then some speculators. But if we look at these as real economies are driven by consumers, right? And we have to think about who are going to be the consumers that populate and help drive sustainable economies in these virtual worlds. So I think that a lot of the building, right? Of course, friction around onboarding, that is going to come down. That's just, this, I think, pretty standard product stuff. But I think also like finding the best, gotcha mechanics and upgrade systems and crafting systems, right? I'm a Project Cube guy, right? Like, so once we have loops like that in these Web3 economies, I think those are going to be the things that actually drive real consumer demand, which will then allow for a healthier economy, which will then kind of serve the planner and more economic type archetypes. So yeah, I think like for me, the sustainable gotcha mechanics, I think that's actually going to be one of the key catalysts that kind of gets us like the industry as well as Axie to the kind of this next growth cycle.
All right. Well, very good. Thank you both very much.
Hi, Hilka. Hi, Sebastian. It's great to see you. It's a very, very special year for the gaming world and gaming history here, because this year is the 10th anniversary of Clash of Clans and Candy Crush. So of course, mobile gaming had been around for a few years before that. We had Snake or Angry Birds, but these two titles really have, to a large extent, made mobile gaming what it is today. They've made mobile the most important gaming platform. They've introduced billions of players to the joy of playing games. They've largely entered pop culture, where it's still very, very present everywhere. And then they've defined the era, and hopefully the next era as well, like Mario or Castle Wolfenstein or Warcraft before them. So we are very privileged to get the two of you today to spend some time discussing the last decade and what's coming next. So maybe to get started, I would want to ask you what game you're playing at right now. Sebastian, maybe can you share what you're playing?
Yeah, and I'm not saying this to make Ilka happy, but I'm playing Clash Quest a lot, but it's mainly because they totally nerfed the game and reset it for me, so I have to play all my way up to the top again. So thank you for that, Ilka. That's been my holiday so far.
And okay, and Ilka, what are you playing?
Hey, thanks, Sebastian. Very nice to hear that. I'm playing actually several games right now. Unfortunately, I can't disclose the names, and even if I did, you guys wouldn't really know of them. They are like the next wave of games that we are working on, and a few ones that I'm super excited about in particular. Those are the games that I spend most of my time with, right?
And what about your kids? What would they be playing?
I think my son is the gamer, but he plays mainly FPS games. So I think it's Valorant and Apex and things still, where you can play with friends. Team-based shooters is his thing.
Mm-hmm. And Ilka?
And our kids, well, Fortnite I think is the big game at our household. Then Roblox, some Minecraft. What else? Then together we play a lot of sports games. So I'm a big ice hockey fan and trying to get my one easy way to get your kids excited about it actually is to turn on NHL hockey and start to play together. And so we play that, and of course FIFA and those type of games too.
Okay, so maybe a sports title next time. That would be a first. Sebastian, should we start with some history? I don't know how well the audience know you, but you were the creative force behind Candy Crush. That's really your title, and then many other King titles. Could you take us back to the founding years? King was founded in 2003, and so way before the rise of Facebook and the mobile app store. So what were the key milestones in building King?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it sort of brief, but it's a long 20-year history, I guess. King started out having a skill-based platform where we had these web-based flash games where you would play tournaments for fun and for cash. That was the origin business we started in 2003. And that was pretty close after the dot-com crash, so we didn't have a lot of funds to build marketing or build the business, so we relied on partnerships with the classic portals to get traffic. That was our foundation of the business. We grew well in Europe, worked with AOL, Yahoo, and actually got so good KPIs, we managed to displace our American competitors and take the US Yahoo account as well. And I think we became profitable 2 years in. We raised some capital, but we didn't really spend that capital. We kept it in the bank. But the big shift in the company happened in 2009. We started to see a big softening in the US. We saw our portal partners, they lost half their game traffic in a single year to Facebook. That was sort of the start of the social gaming era. And I think the first year we tried to sort of put our heads down and ignored it. And then it started happening in Europe in 2010, and we had to adapt. And that was where we sort of realized we had to pivot the company. So we decided to go for like parallel development to be able to innovate fast enough. We were sort of late to the Facebook party at that point. We had Zynga, was already really big. We tried to build on our own games we had on the skill platform to go to Facebook, and we started 6 parallel projects to crack Facebook. And the last of those 6 was a game I designed called Bubble Saga. That was our first Saga game, and that was the first game we really saw good retention, started to monetize a bit, and we could actually market the game profitably on Facebook. So at the time before that, nobody had really marketed their Facebook games. Everybody relied on growth hacking the Facebook platform itself, but they had started to block that more and more, Facebook. So I think we were the first gaming company to actually market with performance marketing on Facebook for our games. And that allowed us to grow. And I think we then focused only doing the Saga format, but multiple games. And the third game was Bubble Witch Saga. That was our really big first Facebook hit. And you could tell because a lot of competitors started imitating or copying that game. So a lot of, I guess, flattery, copycatting is flattery, I guess. But that was the game that propelled it to top 3 position of developers on Facebook, and everybody took notice. And then it shifted again when we got our 5th Saga game out, which was Candy Crush. That was the game that really took us to the top of Facebook. And at the same time, the mobile landscape started to shift. You had the mobile platforms, mainly iOS. Android wasn't big yet, but they started to offer free-to-play mechanics where you actually could do payments within the game. That was a new thing, just about when we rolled out Candy Crush and these Facebook games. So we elected to go pretty sort of, again, early on a free-to-play, at least on mobile, and we converted Candy Crush Saga for mobile, and we tried to get Apple excited about it. Everybody said you had to rely on Apple promoting your game. It was the only way to grow in the market. And Apple didn't give us much love when we launched the game. We were hoping to get a big promotion. We got nothing. We were sort of pissed off. I remember we worked together then, Stefan, so we talked over the weekend, and we launched the Android version 3 days later. We had built that in secret, put that out, and we started to do paid marketing instead for the games. And that's really when you saw having a cross-platform game that allowed people to play socially across Facebook, Android, iOS. That's really when it took off. And to summarize, I think the year 2013, just to put a sort of a milestone out there, I think King bought 32% of all mobile ads in the world that year. We sort of essentially took a third of all mobile banners in the world were for Candy Crush Saga. So it tells you how new it was. Doing mobile marketing for a game was sort of unheard of, but we had the game and we had the technical capability and the marketing team to do that, and it allowed us to scale. And that's sort of where I think the King you know today took off for real.
Thank you. Okay, so Ilkka, quite a different history, right? So I was reading a bit, and I thought you had started with mobile directly, but I read that the first title might have been a browser title before you moved to a focus on iPad. Can you tell us more and what drove these decisions?
Sure. And before I get into that, I have to say that it's always fascinating to hear Sebastian, explaining the kind of King history, because obviously I've had the privilege to look at it like from outside in, but it's always like cool to hear how it like looks like from the inside. So just a massive respect to what you guys did, and yeah, I do remember year 2013 for those reasons that you just mentioned. What an incredible growth you guys had there. But hey, so our story, so we started the company in 2010, and our idea was to bring these games that people would play for a very long time. And we were very much inspired by a game called World of Warcraft at the time. But our idea was to bring sort of similar type of maybe social experiences, but cater them towards much wider audience. And mobile was always on our plans, but at the time, so this is year 2010, actually the platform with the widest reach in our view was Facebook, and browser. So therefore we actually started with Flash games or game for Facebook, and then also on its own individual website, a Flash game. And so that was in 2010. We put the game to beta in I think it was February 2011, it was this like a real-time like MMO RPG game, and unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, it didn't do that well, which made us like take a kind of hard look at the strategy. And then like from our point of view, we kind of like the Facebook didn't seem like an ideal platform for games anymore at that time, and especially not for the type of games that we wanted to do. And therefore we can start to look for like outside. And this is late 2011. And you know, our background like in the previous company was all about mobile. But then, you know, and of course we start to be very excited about mobile, but even more so, we're very excited about tablets, because iPad was a relatively new thing. And you know, like we played a lot of games on iPad, and we kind of thought that, wow, it's actually quite incredible. But you know, it doesn't seem to us that anybody would have done a great kind of social game experience as we kind of thought about social games for that platform. And therefore, when we start to work on a few titles for the kind of tablets, and then later on we of course figured out that okay, it's very easy to kind of port this to smartphones. But anyway, you know, and then like in summer 2012, it got super lucky because like we were working on 5 different games at the time, and then we killed 3 out of those 5. But then 2 games that we actually did release and which went to beta were, the first one was Heyday, and then followed by Clash of Clans 2 months later. And then of course that was kind of the birth of Supercell as we know it today.
And you came much later to Android, if I'm correct, right? You were only available on Apple. Can you tell us a bit more about that strategy?
Yeah, it was, you know, it's one of the kind of toughest choices that I feel that we made as a company. So we had if you just imagine the situation, we had both Clash of Clans and Heyday were in the top 10 of iOS top grossing in the US, and at some point Clash even went to be the #1 game on that list. But yet we kind of felt that these games are sort of unfinished. I mean, of course, games are always unfinished, but there were like certain things that we wanted to really, you know, add to the games, and we kind of just believed so much in this value of focus that we felt that if we now like bring these games also to Android, that will probably slow down the development, and you know we'll lose a little bit of focus, and it actually took a lot of patience and you know lots of discussions to like really like stay laser focused on iOS and to perfect the game as fast as we could on that platform. And we were thinking all the time that at some point when we feel that the game is sort of quote ready, even if the games are never ready in this day and age, but then we thought that okay, then we'll bring the game to Android. And you know it got even tougher because of course you know all of these copycats started to emerge on the Android platform, and here we were, you know, just working on the iOS game, and you know lots of people probably thought that oh, like the Supercell guys, like they're letting other people to kind of eat their lunch. But then finally, like when we did bring Clash, and then later on the other games to Android, I think you know I think it was worth the wait. So you know the players jumped in immediately, and it didn't take long until Clash of Clans was #1 also on Android, and also Heyday did really well. But that was the sort of reason and why we can wait it for so long.
We were always very envious of the close relationship and the love shown by Apple for many years to you guys. But now, you know, as you said, right, it got to #1 on both platforms. So were you expecting, 10 years later that they would still be in the top 10? And if not, what's the most surprising thing about seeing, your games still up there, after so much time?
No, I definitely didn't, and we didn't see it coming. I mean, who could have seen it? I mean, we just possibly couldn't have realized like what those games have turned into. So it's just I think I feel I need to pinch myself like almost every single day, and maybe that is the most surprising thing actually. But the other thing is that I just feel like extremely grateful and thankful for all the players who like stuck with us like all of these years, and it really is incredible. And I'm sure like Sebastian has seen this on the Candy Crush and the other Kings title side as well. But it's amazing like how vested players really become to these games and the kind of type of like effort that they put into them, and how much they actually care about the work that they've done, and also like how passionate they are about them. Like, of course, also in our history, when you have like 10 years of history of creating games like Heyday and Clash of Clans, every once in a while you do an update that isn't that successful and that players don't like, and then you definitely will hear from the players as well. But that's sort of how we can think about it, is that that type of passion, it's fundamental. It's a fantastic thing, and of course, like, you would always hope that the feedback is positive, but even when it's like super harsh and negative, at least there is feedback, and at least it shows that the players really care what you do. And I guess our kind of a nightmare is that you put an update out, and then there's like no reaction, no positive and no negative reaction, and then that would show that, okay, the players don't care anymore. But maybe other than the success, the other surprise has been that, or like thing that I'm really like taken by is like how much players really care about the community and about the game.
Great.
I think we never saw that coming either, the 10-year lasting games. I think even when we went to the public markets, I think our plan was about launching 8 new games per year on top of what we had, which was totally the wrong focus. And I think we distracted ourselves too much with the next project instead of investing enough in the amazing titles we had live. It took a long time to reset that balance for us, actually.
And anything you would do, you would have done differently, or you wish you had done differently?
I don't know where to start. I mean, of course, so many things, of course. Maybe like with one, now that we were talking about culture, one very concrete thing, and maybe this is a good advice to maybe other founders, is that I still wonder why it, given like how much we cared about company culture and how kind of we actually were quite systematic about it. We were, when we founded Supercell, we were super inspired by, for example, the Netflix culture, and we spent like hours of time like going through the Netflix culture, like with the founders, and talking about what type of company we want to build, and then that was something that we actually like spent a lot of time as the company started to grow. But despite all of those things, like for some reason I never, or I shouldn't say never, but it took me like almost 2 years to like kind of write down what our values really were and sort of like formalize them. So maybe like the learning for the other founders is that it's never too early to kind of think about culture, and even if it would sound maybe a bit a kind of corporate or big company thing to do, I would encourage people to like really like write down the culture and define the values in a pretty detailed way, and make a very systematic effort in doing so, and then of course involve other people in the process. I mean, it's obviously the culture shouldn't come down from a CEO. I mean, it's something that everybody is responsible for. But maybe that would be one advice what I would give. And then also like revisit that culture, like probably like not every month, but maybe like every year or every 2 years or something like that.
Okay. And Sebastian, what about building the lasting gaming company? Anything you would share with founders today?
On what side of sort of how to make the company no, but I think it starts, like Ilkka said, talent and culture is where it starts for sure, and then I think it's about allowing people to operate independently, which I think if you're bringing in really senior people, you need to let them operate and run and have accountability and control. I think we've gone back and forth over times as we grew, trying to sort of top manage stuff too much, and it doesn't help, and you lose some good people that way. So I think it's about, if you bring in the talent, you also need to dare to let go and give accountability to others, and that goes for bringing in strong leaders, but also strong teams and strong people on the ground level, just letting them do what they do best and not interfere too much. If you have the right culture, you can operate very efficiently that way.
Mm-hmm. And anything you would do or you would have done differently over the journey?
I mean, maybe it's a sort of a bigger topic in itself, but I mean, I think we did shift our structure because we had to go public. And I think we sort of knew that we were sort of adding more process and structure that sort of hampered at least the culture and our way of operating historically. And I think we didn't probably appreciate the impact that would have longer term and act on it to alleviate that pain. And I think it came back later that we started to become slow in places where we didn't expect to be slow, and we didn't notice. It sort of crept up on us. So I think when you know what's working, you have to, like Ilka was saying, you have to be actually work pretty hard to protect it as well, because it can pretty slowly deteriorate if you're not there every time.
Yeah. And then Sebastian, and you also touched upon it when we discussed the history of King. It's not been linear, right? There were many storms along the way, and as we enter what is probably a more challenging environment, what would be lessons that would be worth sharing with gaming founders today as they look at the outlook?
No, but I think we've seen hard times as well. When we had to pivot, we had some board members didn't even believe in us and told myself and Ricardo we were too old and should hire a 20-year-old from the West Coast to replace us because we didn't get Facebook. And I think we managed to prove them wrong later, which was a good feeling. But in the end, I think when it's tough, I think it's about focus for me. I think often as things do go well, you start to grow quickly, you might have raised a lot of capital. You sometimes do a lot of things in parallel. You try to do a lot of things. And when it's tougher, you need to dare to cut off things that are distracting, whether that's a project you don't need currently or getting everybody to rally around the same problem is very helpful. And when you come out of that thing at the tunnel at the end, it actually adds a lot of energy and shared purpose to the team. So I think the tough times can be quite formative for a company and for a team. But it needs focus and it needs sort of more engagement from you as a leader, closer with the teams and be a bit more nimble, which means you have to dare to cut off things that are not important right now and distracting. Maybe it's a new market, maybe it's a new technology, maybe it's too much admin. But look at the things that you can remove that makes it sort of makes your day more focused again.
Okay. Ilka, how do you manage to keep the teams motivated between live franchises, which are very important with large, highly engaged player communities, and new titles, and trying to come up with great new games for your players?
Well, I think it all comes down to hiring the right type of people with the right type of a mindset. So you really want to hire people who, they ultimately they see their role as such that they're being at service for the players. And if you can come in with that type of mindset, then everybody wants to do whatever is best for the players, and believing that that ultimately it's also best for Supercell and of course for them as individuals. So I think it's all about hiring the right type of people. They are in a creative business, and a lot of that motivation has to come from the inside. And I think there's only so much the leader can do.
But I think also that's shifted over the period we've been operating, I think, Ilka, as well, because when we started, launching a game had a lower barrier for anyone in the market. So a new game team could almost believe that we can get the game out. And today, most of the projects you start will be killed. So, and it takes a certain psyche to work on 3 projects over 6 years, and every 2 years it gets killed, and still think that's fun, right? And in the beginning, you could almost expect, if I get to work on a new game, we're going to at least publish it and I can show it to people. It might not be big. In today's world, most projects never get shown to anyone, and it's actually tougher to do new games psychologically than operating a live game.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, actually, Sebastian, and I guess in that type of a environment and setting, you really need to get your kind of satisfaction and job satisfaction from working with great people, working on a really kind of fun title, and then and it's tough, I know, but then it should almost be less important what the ultimate outcome is. But you should really it's a cliche, but you should somehow enjoy the journey more than maybe the result. Easier said than done, of course.
For sure.
Obviously, we've been working in the gaming industry for a very long time, and there is a very strong independent community. how have you managed the tension between leading the creative teams and then what is the necessary commercialization of the IP or the titles? I mean, as we've seen very recently with Diablo, it's not easy to strike the right balance. Any thoughts you can share there?
No, but I think oddly enough, or at least if I state it a bit bluntly, I think if you have a strong game, it's not that hard to monetize harder by being a bit evil, but often that comes at the cost of users being disappointed, or you're actually starting to lower retention and you're churning players. So for us, outside some of the same ethical thinking of making sure Candy was never pay to win, but you could always beat the game without ever paying, and we checked that diligently. It was also about when we started to evolve the game and A/B testing new ideas, that we wanted to make sure any new idea that would improve monetization, it had to be positive on retention and engagement as well. If you just keep adding more and more heavy monetization, you're going to create a bad experience and you're starting to veer off the ethical line probably of game design. But of course, you have a lot of people who want to build a business. So it was clear that if we managed for that rule, like new ideas should always improve the player experience essentially and add a bit more retention. You can find features that do both, which was quite interesting to us. We often thought in the beginning that was a conflict. Either we monetize or we retain, and then eventually we found ideas that proved to both retain and monetize at the same time, whether that's a sort of a clan feature or whatever it is. And I think with that mindset, I think it became quite natural for people to always think of the player as king and making sure the experience gets better and better. And if we do that, we actually build the business that way. It's not a conflict with our players. It's actually in service of them. And I think partly it also came from the classic console game industry. They felt that freemium game design was evil. But I think we, to ourselves at least, and to many others, we've proven you can actually create a great game experience and a great business off the bat of that.
I mean, we haven't seen either Clash or Candy Crush on Oculus or the AR/VR platform. Ika, should we expect to see Clash there at some point or not? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, never say never, of course. And like if there's one thing that it's proven to be true about the games business, that every once in a while there's a big platform shift. So of course you got to be humble and stay open-minded for the time being. However, like as we've evaluated these other platforms, it's just that the sort of the install base is maybe isn't quite there if you view it from our perspective. So maybe 250 million people play our games every month, and from that point of view, we are, and what really gets us excited about it is this opportunity to get the widest possible audience to play our games. And maybe from that point of view, those platforms that you mentioned aren't quite there yet, but of course it doesn't mean that they wouldn't get there at some point.
Okay, very clear. Sebastian, maybe on the other major trend right now, which is obviously Web3 and crypto. If you were still at King because you've just left, would the Web3 keep you up at night, or would you sleep soundly?
I wouldn't be. I mean, I've looked at Web3 a lot. I've invested in a few sort of blockchain companies, but a lot of the things I've seen on the game space is not sort of. I don't like the game design where it's actually more about speculation and extracting money again, which I think goes against our structure and I'm sure Supercell's thinking. I do love play to earn as a principle. I love creator economies to build that, but I'm not sure actually what I'm seeing now. You could do that without having to use blockchain and crypto as a foundation. That there are games like Roblox or Stardoll way before that actually were play to earn and sort of creator economies without having to use blockchain. So I'm bullish on that design principle of play to earn. I'm less bullish on Web3 technology right now shifting the landscape, where you're needing it to shift the landscape. So it's about having a great user experience, and often adding Web3 goes for a worse user experience currently.
Thank you. And quick fire, Ika, can you run a fully remote successful studio?
Well, I probably can't. I'm sure somebody can, and And you know, I think, you know, there's bound to be like very successful remote studios. I'm sure Sebastian would know better, but I just, you know, fundamentally I believe that, you know, there's gonna be people who can do that. And in fact, actually, we are currently like thinking about and looking at the possibility of opening up a studio in Americas. And we sort of, because our office is based in San Francisco, even internally we call it a San Francisco studio. But these days we just call it the North American studio, because we fully believe that it will for a large part, it probably will be remote.
Great. And Sebastian, you know, gaming has gone fully mainstream. You know, I mean, it's the largest entertainment category already. Where does it go from here?
I think it's going to stay big, of course, but I think what's probably going to keep evolving is our need for social interaction in the games, rather than new technology like AR, VR. I think it's about technology that allows us to play together, interact together. I think that's where that really makes gaming stand out as an interactive, collaborative social experience. So new technologies that allow that, and whether that's a metaverse or not, I wouldn't dare to say, but I think things that allow us to operate. I think we've seen things like Discord is much more interesting to me to help people interact in games than VR has been so far, and I think that trend will continue.
Thank you. Look, that was terrific. You know, just last question before we part ways. Any fun predictions you would leave us with, Ilkka?
If there's one thing I've learned about our business is that do not make any predictions, and never ever participate panels where the title is the future of games. It's impossible to say.
Okay, I'll take that as an answer. Sebastian?
No, these are dangerous, but I think I think there's going to be some massive play to. My belief is going to be some massive play to earn games coming in the future that won't necessarily be built on Web3.
Awesome.
That's my hope. Or
well,
otherwise,
guys,
I'll have to prove it myself. We'll see.
We'd love to see that. Guys, this was fantastic. Happy anniversary, you know, 10 year. That's been a fantastic decade, and I'm sure there are many more ahead of us. So thank you again. And, you know, I'm thanking the audience here. I hope you had fun, and have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.